Welcome to the Weirwood Compendium 6, The Devil in the Deep Green Sea. We have special introduction music from the Holographics about Under the Sea Goddesses. And I'm joined by my guest, Quinn from Ideas of Ice and Fire, and we are here to bring you Weirwood Compendium 6, which will take us under the sea. Hello, everyone. Come away, under the sea. Welcome, everyone. And we are indeed going to go under the sea today. And no, I'm not going to do the entire thing upside down. That would be disorienting. So Quinn, say hello while I flip my camera over.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Hope you're ready for this. It's going to be fun. Under the sea. I got my ocean waves going on in the background.
Nice.
You guys can see that. Pretty sure you can. Yeah. It's going to be fun. I'm excited.
Hey, everyone's telling me upside down. Hey, dude, you're upside down. Yeah, I know. It's a joke. It's a joke, people. It's a joke.
Part of the joke.
See, it's all about inversions. Under the sea, the crows are white as snow.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's all upside down. All right, so let me just tune this in here. Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming. San Rixian sends her apologies. She is traveling across the country in a metal box propelled by science and technology towards the state of California, where she's visiting some friends. So she will not be able to make it today, but she sends her best wishes, of course. And it will just be me and Quinn today. And we've actually got, I've got a big episode, and I've got a hard deadline. We got 2.5 hours to do this. So I'm going to charge through it pretty quickly. So it will not be a lot of fluff and flim flam today, because we have lots of symbolism to talk about. Oh, yes, do we ever? Let me pause this song here. And by the way, that intro song was from the Holographics. That's my band with the Amethyst Koala. So I'll play a little more of that in 2 weeks when we do some sort of follow-up Q&A to this episode, which we are going to do. In fact, what we'll be doing in 2 weeks, next week we've got a Between Two Weirwoods episode coming up. And in fact, I will ask you all to kindly mosey on over to the Between... Oh, whoops. Let's not have the double talk. There we go. All right. So basically, guys, you guys know I have the Between Two Weirwoods episodes that I've been doing for just live discussion panels. I went ahead and started a separate YouTube channel. That's the short story. And I need everyone to go over and subscribe to it, because next week I'm going to be going live on that channel and not this channel. Same Sunday time slot, but on that channel. And if you do not subscribe, you won't get notifications. So please go and subscribe. And with that said, oh yeah, I guess we should, let me drop a link for, I know all you guys subscribe to Quinn's channel already, but just in case, let's go ahead and drop that link too. Quinn, what have you been working on lately, buddy?
What I've been working on lately? Well, the main video that I'm working on this month is Ultimate Guide to God Emperor of Dune. Trying to put that out by the end of the month. People have really been hassling me about it. Just getting that out. Then after that, I've got some Mist of Avalon stuff coming. And then obviously always a Song of Ice and Fire. So yeah, that's what you can look forward to on my YouTube channel, Ideas of Ice and Fire, which just crossed 100K, by the way.
Yeah, I saw that. You got a fancy glass YouTube thingy.
I know. It's all shiny and stuff.
That is very cool. Did you light it up with your under the sea purple light that you're using right now when you took those pictures? Is that what you did?
Not yet. I'm getting ready to move. I still have it in the box. I'm going to put it on display once I move.
Nice. Well, guys, I am now changing the WordPress essay version of this to public. so that everyone can go see it and read along if they care to. Some people do like to do that. So let me grab the link for that and drop it in the old chat. Oh, I see the ritual Steven Stark 666 super chat. Thank you, Steven. It looks like somebody beat you to the punch. Oh no. Came in after you. Julie Beth Styles covering all the bases. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Julie. And here's the link for the essay version if you want to read along. Just dropped it in the chat. And all right, let's blast off. Welcome, friends. Oh, you know what I need to do, Quinn? I need to record this with Ableton Live, so I don't have to redo it all later. That'd be good. One second, guys, while I queue up my recording software. How's everyone feeling? How's everyone feeling in the chat? Yes, I see some congratulations for Quinn reaching 100,000. That's awesome.
Thank you.
Oh, Julie Best Styles with another super chat in anticipation for Quinn's Mists of Avalon videos. Very cool.
Oh yeah, it's gonna be fun.
That's not a bad way to get a crash course on Arthurian legend, is it?
Yeah, I mean, Mists of Avalon. If that's how you want to get into Arthurian legend, that's like the best way, in my opinion. Best.
Nice.
Top of the line.
Oh, and oh, that's right, Sean E. We got 2 ritual super chats. So Steven Stark with the 666 and Sean E with the 420. That's very, very nice. Thank you, guys. Thank you. All right, so let me just go over to this one and mute everything else and record. Yes. Yes, now what's happening is permanent. It won't disappear into the ether. Okay, guys, so The Devil and the Deep Green Sea, Weirwood Compendium number 6. Welcome, friends, myth heads, and patrons, YouTube and podcast listeners, and blog readers all. Welcome to your courtside seat to history in the making. That's right, it's the wordplay that was promised, the hidden key to the Weirwood net. Ever wonder why there's so many fish people legends on the margins of A Song of Ice and Fire? Ever wonder what the hell Patchface is talking about? The ridiculously fishy symbolism of House Manderley or House Velaryon? Well, there's a way to understand all of this. And doing so will tell us a ton about the Weirwoods and the Greenseers, yes. But only if you have eyes to see. And we are going to give you those eyes today. I say we because I actually can't take credit for the discovery that we're going to be diving into today. For the most part, I do write about my own theories and let other people develop their theories on their own. However, once in a while, one of my friends and collaborators discovers a symbol or metaphor or theory which is so central to the action that I simply have to write about it. You may remember the first episode of Moons of Ice and Fire, Prelude to a Chill, which was largely based around the theory that Night's Queen was actually more like an ice priestess, an icy version of Melisandre, as opposed to a white or a female other. That theory, of course, belongs to Durin Durrandon, a very old friend of mine from the Westeros.org forums, who's actually just recently become the Zodiac patron for House Pisces. Thanks for your support, buddy. Durin wrote this theory a few years back on the forums, and it's always seemed to be on the mark to me. And then when I began researching about the others, I found the idea central to understanding the others. And so, with his permission and collaboration, I brought the theory to you and then built upon it. We're going to do something like that again today. Ravenous Reader, the poetess of the Nenemones, is the one who discovered the wordplay-based symbolism that we're about to unveil. And as you're about to see, it's quite the discovery. I'm practically green with envy for not seeing it first. I kid, of course, and I'm quite happy to give all credit and aplomb to Ravenous Reader for this. Additionally, we in the community, including Ravenous, myself, and countless others of the Starry Host, and the Myth Heads, and the Westeros.org forum goers, have actually been developing these ideas for probably about 2 years now. And that's, so it's become sort of a group project at this point. It's an idea whose time has long been at hand, and I am honored and privileged to have Ravenous Reader's blessing to guide you beneath the waves and into the Green Sea. To be honest, we've mostly been ignoring water symbolism, apart from discovering the waves of moonblood symbolism that seems to be tied to the concept of bleeding stars and floods caused by moon meteors. But apart from that, I've been skillfully sidestepping all the watery symbolism that has, quite frankly, been popping up everywhere we go. And you can't help but dance a little bit when you have a jester hat on. Anyways, Take the sea dragon myth, for example. The sea dragon, a legend ostensibly about a sea monster, turns out instead to be about a weirwood boat. Still something large that belongs in the sea, and maybe it had a nice sea monster for a masthead, who knows? But of course, the primary significance of seeing the truth of the Weirwood boat was that it led us to discover the Weirwood throne, the Weirwood crown, and all the rest of the green seer symbolism that clings to the Grey King like barnacles on the hull of a Weirwood submarine. Ultimately, the sea dragon myth seems to be less about Poseidon-related matters and more about a person who possesses the living fire of the Weirwoods, as well as the fire or power of the fiery dragon meteors, which are also part of the sea dragon myth. It's actually a version of the Azor Ahai story about a dragon-blooded green seer and meteor swords, in other words, but it's coded in the language of the sea. Sea monsters and boats, and a mermaid wife, and a drowned god who brings fire out of the sea and battles the storm god, and a nation of pirates and mariners. That's the sea dragon myth. Now in Weirwood Compendium 5, to ride the green dragon, we've introduced the green dragon motif and explored all the symbolism that goes with that. Symbolism that revolves around Rhaego and Rhaegal and Daenerys, with assists from people like Quentin and Aegon the Unworthy, and even Moondancer the Green Dragon. Funny thing, just like the sea dragon symbolism, the green dragon ideas again lead us to the idea of a dragon-blooded green seer who sounds a damn lot like Azor Ahai Reborn. And it too seems to use watery language to do so. And I will now mute my phone. Got a bad run of forgetting to mute my phone when I live stream. Sorry, guys. As we saw in the last episode, the green dragon is heavily tied to the thunderbolt and storm symbolism that comes from the Ironborn myth of the Grey King and the storm god's thunderbolt, which is watery mythology, but it's watery mythology about meteor thunderbolts and obtaining the fire of the gods. The green dragon is also linked to wildfire, which is basically liquid fire. It's also green and is associated with magicians, the alchemists who make it, and dragons, the Targaryens who use it. Wildfire even burns on the water, as we know well from the Battle of the Blackwater, which we're going to talk about today. So it really is like sea dragon fire, and Tyrion even compares the wildfire at the Battle of the Blackwater to dragon fire directly. Then at the end of To Ride the Green Dragon, we took a look at Rhaegal's scenes in Meereen, and we found our friendly green dragon linked to a bunch of wordplay about drowned fire and fire that washes over things. More importantly, we saw Rhaegal linked to a bunch of sea dragon symbolism, starting with Quentin's plan to ride the green dragon being compared to King Aegon the Unworthy, building those wooden dragons full of wildfire, which catastrophically caught on fire in the Kingswood, with those burning wooden dragons being amazing sea dragon symbols, of course. Then there was Quentin seeing Rhaegal uncoiling like some great green serpent in the climax scene of the Dragon Tamer chapter, which puts us in mind of the sea dragon myth once again, since Naga means cobra or snake and is tied to a whole host of water dragon and water snake symbolism and mythology. We even saw sea dragon symbolism in the placement of Rhaegal's egg on Drogo's pyre during the alchemical wedding. It was surrounded by Drogo's black river of darkness hair, which gives the image of a green dragon, which gives us the image of a green dragon's egg as a sea dragon swimming in a river of darkness. The watery language is not only found in people and dragons who symbolize Azor Ahai the Green Seer, but also in some of the actual Azor Ahai mythology itself, it turns out. According to what Melisandre tells Stannis, Azor Ahai Reborn is supposed to be a hero reborn in the sea.
The darkness will devour them all, she says. The night that never ends. She talks of prophecies, a hero reborn in the sea, living dragons hatched from dead stone.
Now, this quote has never made much sense, really, beyond the idea of the sea dragon as a stone dragon moon meteor that falls into the sea, since the moon meteors which drank the fire of the sun do represent Azor Ahai Reborn, in a certain sense, the offspring of sun and moon. Additionally, Azor being reborn in the sea does seem a good match for all the Grey King and drowned god mythology about being reborn in the sea and bringing fire out of the sea, although these ideas are still fairly cryptic. And what we can say is that again and again, the clues about Azor Ahai being a green seer seem to come to us in the language of Leviathan, in the speech of the Green Sea. Green Sea. The clues about the Green Seers are found in the Green Sea. We have sea dragons and green dragons, both of which are really talking about green seer dragons, and in the language of the Green Sea. What kind of dreadful wordplay is this? Why, it's the Green Sea wordplay of the one and only Ravenous Reader, of course. Well, it's George R.R. Martin's wordplay, really, but Ravenous is the one who sniffed it out, and so she gets credit. George is basically having a roaring good time with the wordplay of Green Seer and Green Sea. It's all very clever, and ultimately the point is this. The undersea realm, the Green Sea, is serving as a metaphor for the Weirwood net, where the Green Seers live. When things happen under the sea, they are often metaphors for things which happened inside the Weirwood net, which we can think of as the Green Sea, S-E-E-C. A dragon that comes from the sea, like the sea dragon, or Azor Ahai being reborn in the sea. Both are really talking about Azor Ahai, the dragon, being reborn in the Green Sea of the Weirwood net. See? A Green Sea or dragon is a sea dragon in that he is a dragon person that inhabits the Green Sea of the Weirwood net, where the Green Seers live. Yes, that's right, my friends. From Patchface's riddles, to Drowning Moon Maidens, to Nimble Dick's favorite Squisher legends, Azor Ahai being reborn in the sea. It's all really about the Weirwood net and the freaky things that go on in there. I know. Oh. So much to discuss, Now here's how the rest of this episode is going to go. I'm going to run through a bunch of quick examples of Azor Ahai reborn people drowning and transforming in the sea in various ways. And then we'll go in depth on one example in particular, which sort of ties everything together. Then we'll do the same with Nissa Nissa figures, going more quickly through some of the Moon Maiden drownings to compare them, and then going deep on one in particular. Deep ones. Okay, let's dive in. And that is the end of the first section. All right. Let me go ahead and pull up some patron names so we can pay homage to the myth heads of the Starry Host who send me their hard-earned dollars. Thank you, myth heads. Totally appreciate that stuff, man, because I wouldn't be able to do it otherwise, let me tell you. And we are right in the middle of a move right now, so appreciate all the support while things are a little crazy. I've not been answering all my messages and emails and things. It's been a little tight, but this next section, and we're going to do this without music in order to keep things running today, like I said. This next section is called The Merling That Was Promised. And it is brought to us by Viseria Sunbreaker, High Priestess of the Sacred Order of the Black Hand, by Matthias Mormont, the Sea Goat of the Bottomless Depths, by Count Magpie the Rude, the Dinky Giant, Hornblower of the Oslo Fjord, by the Lady of Stellar Reason and Maleficence, and by Lord Brandon Brewer of Castle Blackroon, sworn alesmith to House Stark, Grand Maester of the Zithomancers Guild, and Keeper of the Buzz. And at this time, I would also like to stop and honor one of two new dragon patrons. I will be honoring the second one in the next section. But our first new dragon patron, joining Bronze Steries of the Lily White Scales and Bronze Horns, Wingbones, and Spinal Crest, the wise old dragon who riddles with sphinxes, I'd like you to give a warm myth-head welcome to Vesperies, the Lightbringer, the Shadowfire dragon, whose scales are as dark as smoke, whose horns, wingbones, and spinal crest are the color of molten silver, and whose eyes are two black moons. It is said that Vesperies is the secret spawn of Meraxes, and is known by some as the Phoenix of the Hellholt. So give a warm round of applause for Vesperies, the Lightbringer, our newest dragon patron. Thank you very much for your kind support, generous support. All right. So the Merling that was promised. Calling Azor Ahai a Merling is my fun way of saying that Azor Ahai is our hero reborn in the sea. I was going to title this section with the more straightforward, A Hero Reborn in the Sea, but then my spirit of fun kicked in, and my love of Merlings. So Azor Ahai was a Merling, but not really. His rebirth is simply tied to the Weirwoods, which is an idea that we're well familiar with since we discovered it already by other means. That's what's so great about the under the sea symbolism. It's going to interlock seamlessly with and confirm all the best theories that are right and good, because the under the sea wordplay is right and good. It all starts with the concept of the Weirwoods as a fishing weir, I think. I've quoted this line many times, but I'm going to quote it again. And think about the watery realm as the realm of the green seers as you listen.
For men, time is a river. We are trapped in its flow, hurtling from past to present, always in the same direction. The lives of trees are different. They root and grow and die in one place, and that river does not move them. The oak is the acorn is the oak, and the weirwood. 1,000 human years are a moment to a weirwood, and through such gates you and I may gaze into the past.
All right, a fishing weir spans a river and is not moved by it. It's very like a bridge. And in fact, some weirs do serve as bridges. The weirwoods are something like a cosmic fishing weir or a bridge which spans the cosmic river of time. This is very like Yggdrasil, of course, the world tree that spans all 9 realms. And you can see how it is literally true of the weirwoods, which are indeed gates through which the green seers can see the past and perhaps a bit of the future. They do indeed exist partially outside the river of time, unmoved by it. And even more, they seem to have access to any point in that river. In this schema, men are the fish trapped in the river, while the fishing weir of the weirwood net occasionally plucks a... Oh, I'm sorry. In this schema, men are the fish trapped in the river, with the fishing weir of the weirwood net occasionally plucking a fish man from the river of time and trapping him in the weir, which is akin to plucking him from the realm of mortal men and giving him godlike powers. You can see how well this metaphor works. The green seer is physically pinioned to the weirwoods like a fish caught in a weir, but in doing so, they are freed from the river of time and the mortality of humans. This is the theme of most Odin myths and shamanic practices, giving up physical abilities to gain magical ones, denying the flesh to unleash the spirit. Our prime example of such a green seer fish caught in the weir is, of course, Bloodraven, aka Brynden Rivers. That's right. He's literally a man of the rivers who is physically entangled in a wooden weir. His dual Targaryen Blackwood heritage implies him as a tree person and a dragon person, and he is indeed a dragon person merging with a tree. That takes care of the dragon entering the weirwood net symbolism, and his name, Rivers, then adds the connotation of water, and thus makes Lord Brynden a sea dragon, or a fish man caught in the weir. Don't forget that our young Lord Brandon Stark is also half Tully, and therefore a bit wolfish. Just don't call him a merman. Although because of his broken legs, he does have to crawl around on land like a mermaid or merman would have to. As I mentioned in The Grey King and the Sea Dragon, a great likeness is drawn between Bloodraven and the Grey King when we see the white weirwood roots that coil around and through Bloodraven's body are described as white wooden serpents, which is evocative of the sea dragon that turned out to be a white weirwood boat. Grey King sits in a throne of sea dragon weirwood, and Bloodraven sits in a throne of white serpent weirwood roots. Now think about the weirwood boat thing as a metaphor for sailing the cosmic ocean via the power of the weirwood. Aha, now you're beginning to see how this works, aren't you? The weirwoods are like a ship or like a vehicle for astral projection, which is akin to sailing the cosmic ocean. That's why the Grey King sits in a weirwood throne inside a weirwood boat. It's a double metaphor. The Grey King didn't acquire fire from a sea monster, no, or an actual burning tree for that matter. He found it inside the green sea of the Weirwood net. He is the drowned god-man who died to immerse himself in the green sea and then become a hero reborn in the sea, who brought the fire of the gods out of that sea for man to possess. This lines up with what I've been speculating about Nissa Nissa opening up the Weirwoods for humans to become green seers, and about Azor Ahai being the first such. We're going to see a lot of evidence for these ideas today. The idea of a sea dragon, a wooden boat, possessing living fire, has led us to some great burning boat imagery. Consider the Tully funeral rites, which they imagined to send their dead down to the watery halls where the Tullys held eternal court, with schools of fish their last attendants. Before they are submerged in the river, however, they are set on fire. Fiery death transformation, and then drowning. Then its destination, watery halls, which are really the Weirwood net. In terms of symbolism, the dead Tully is undergoing fire transformation while using a ship to sail to the afterlife. And in particular, he's using a burning ship to enter the green sea of the Weirwood net, symbolically. He's possessing the sea dragon's fire. We saw a similar burning boat funeral with Dantos in Signs and Portals 2, if you've listened to that one already. The sequence is very important. So Dantos offers up his moon maiden Sansa, for which Peter had promised him 30,000 dragons in return, creating the thousands of dragons coming from the sacrifice of the moon maiden symbolism. But instead, Peter gave Dantos actual death and a symbolic fire transformation via setting the little boat that Dantos was in on fire. Presumably, Dantos and the boat eventually sink and symbolically go down to the watery halls, a la the Tully funeral. This scene basically depicts a foolish Azor Ahai meddling with forces he doesn't understand by offering Nissa Nissa to the gods, with the result being that Azor Ahai himself dies and enters the Weirwood net. Dantos is using the burning boat as a vehicle to enter the sea, just like the Grey King used his Weirwood boat to gain access to the Green Sea of the Weirwoods. There was an interesting and important line in the Dantos scene where Peter suggests that Dantos, who is a raging alcoholic, would simply have drunk up those 30,000 dragons. This implies the fire dragons that come from the moon as an intoxicating substance, which seems like obvious food and drink of the gods imagery, and that's basically the same thing as the fire of the gods, of course. Consider this line from Jojen in A Dance with Dragons.
It is given to a few to drink from that green fountain while still in mortal flesh, to hear the whisperings of the leaves, and to see as the trees see, said Jojen.
That's a little bit roundabout, as a fountain is not quite a sea, but of course that really doesn't matter. The green sea symbolism works with green lakes, rivers, ponds, or even glasses of green wine, or maybe even a flask of wildfire. Honestly, any body of water can be used. The description of the green sea or gift as a green liquid that one can drink is what I find compelling, as it again puts the fire of the gods in liquid form, just like the Dantos scene. But this time it's a green liquid that is specifically used as a metaphor for green seeing by Jojen. This is George waving the metaphor in front of our faces here. He's showing us that green liquids can symbolize green seeing, then throws in the line about being able to see as the trees see. Now, the idea of drinking a green drink, which represents the fire of the gods, really does have to put us in mind of Aerion Brightflame, the Targaryen prince who died drinking wildfire, imagining it would turn him into a real dragon. The line was,
One night, in his cups, he drank a jar of wildfire after telling his friends it would transform him into a dragon. But the gods were kind, and it transformed him into a corpse.
This compares very well to the idea of Dantos drinking up the thousands of dragons he was promised for surrendering up the Moon Maiden, and then being turned into a corpse. It also compares very well to a green seer like Bloodraven turning into a wooden corpse as he drinks from the green fountain. Dantos' second life as a green seer is implied by his fiery death in a sea dragon boat, while Aerion drank from the green fountain in order to have a second life inside a dragon, with the dragons standing in for the Weirwood tree. Dragons and Weirwoods do both eat people, after all, and are associated with blood and fire. You may recall the famous line from a Tyrion chapter of A Dance with Dragons, which I used to make the case for Tyrion as a secret Targaryen, which absolutely fits right in here.
If I drink enough fire wine, he told himself, perhaps I'll dream of dragons.
Which indeed he does. That night, he dreams of meeting Daenerys and being fed to her dragons. And the next night, after a line about matching Illyrio cup for cup of wine, Tyrion dreams of that weird battle scene with Barristan the Bold and Bittersteel, where dragons are wheeling in the sky above. There's also the very first line of Tyrion's first chapter of A Dance with Dragons, which is, he drank his way across the narrow sea. That's a great one. Drinking the fire of the gods is what allows you to use the green sea as a portal. something that we'll be following up on in the Signs and Portals series. Ravenous Reader chimes in here with a find that relates. Viserys is another foolish dragon figure, much like Dantos, who sold his moon maiden, just like Dantos, and in return was famously crowned with molten gold. That's definitely a depiction of someone obtaining the fire of the gods and dying at the same time. And when Dany sees a vision of Viserys later in A Dance with Dragons, it says that
Viserys began to laugh until his jaw fell away from his face, smoking, and blood and molten gold ran from his mouth.
It's like George is showing us that Viserys tried to drink the liquid fire of the gods, the molten gold, and simply couldn't handle it. His jaw falls off to signify his inability, or you might even say his unworthiness. During an earlier nightmare vision of Viserys, during Dany's Wake the Dragon dream, it says that the molten gold trickled down his face like wax, burning deep channels in his flesh, which kind of evokes the face carving of a weirwood tree. And that same passage also has his eyes bursting open again, which again might suggest the bloody eyes of a weirwood tree. And all of this, the death of Viserys, Dany's two visions of Viserys, which take place 5 books apart, it all takes place in the Green Dothraki Sea. That's right. We will talk more about the Green Sea next episode. Oh, yes. Because, yeah, Dany was also reborn as Azor Ahai in the Green Dothraki Sea. Now, perhaps more important than Azor Ahai drinking the fire of the gods is the idea of his being drowned or immersed in a sea or river, with bonus points for that water being green. As we discussed in the last episode, Rhaegar's body falling into the green banks of the Trident depicts a sea dragon landing in the water. And now you can see how true that really is. Rhaegar fell into the green banks of a river named for the sea god's symbol of power, the Trident. Rhaegar is definitely an Azor Ahai figure dying and going into the green sea of the Weirwood Net here. And then later on the Green Dothraki Sea, Rhaegar is symbolically reborn as Rhaegal the Green Dragon. We talked about that last time, of course. Dany says that she names Rhaegal for her brother Rhaegar, who died on the green banks of the Trident. Then there's Beric Dondarrion, the Corpse Lord with a flaming sword, who sits in a Weirwood throne. He has watery Weirwood Net symbolism in his death and resurrection, as his first death took place at the Mummer's Ford, with his body falling into the water very much like Rhaegar's did. So he dies in the river, but then he's resurrected and reborn in a grove of ash, which of course is code for inside the Weirwood Net. Then Beric inhabits a dark Weirwood root-infested cave like blood ravens. To say it simply, Beric died in the water and was reborn as a symbol of a green seer dragon. Don't forget magnificent King Renly. Renly, with his deep forest green and deep pond green armor, because he drowned in his own blood.
He had time to make a small, thick gasp before the blood came gushing out of his throat. No! Cried Brienne the Blue when she saw that evil flow, sounding as scared as any little girl. The king stumbled into her arms, a sheet of blood creeping down the front of his armor, a dark red tide that drowned his green and gold. More candles guttered out. Renly tried to speak, but he was choking on his own blood. His legs collapsed, and only Brienne's strength held him up. She threw back her head and screamed, wordless in her anguish.
Renly is a stag man, solar king, and a green man, and he's dying and drowning. His legs collapse, folding like a stag that kneels even. When he's resurrected as Garland Tyrell wearing Renly's armor, he appears as a fiery stag man leading a host of demons, who we can now see as being implied as coming out of the Weirwood Net. Demons coming out of the Weirwood Net. Well, that sounds interesting. I'll have to follow up on that. Speaking of drowning on your own blood, there is a great quote foreshadowing the drowning death of Mikken, the Winterfell Smith, which is ripe with green sea wordplay and is interwoven with actual green sight. It's one that Colin VW, aka Colin Longstrider, the 8th spoke of the Wandering Wheel, found in A Clash of Kings. Thank you, Colin.
The past, the future, the truth. They left him more muddled than ever. When he was alone, Bran tried to open his third eye, but he didn't know how. No matter how he wrinkled his forehead and poked at it, he couldn't see any different than he'd done before. In the days that followed, he tried to warn the others about what Jojen had seen, but it didn't go as he wanted. Micken thought it was funny. The sea, is it? Happens I always wanted to see the sea. Never got where I could go to it, though. So now it's coming to me, is it? The gods are good to take such trouble for a poor smith. You're muted.
Oh, I was just trying out my mime routine. Supposed to read it. Okay. Anyways, Jojen actually sees Micken and a couple other Winterfell residents drowning in his dream, which actually turns out to be a metaphor for the invasion of Theon's dripping wet Ironborn. But for Micken, who always wanted to see the sea, it's a bit more literal when he offers his stubborn defiance to Theon the Conqueror.
The bald man drove the point of his spear into the back of Micken's neck. Steel slid through flesh and came out his throat in a welter of blood. A woman screamed, and Mira wrapped her arms around Rickon. It's blood he drowned on, Bran thought numbly. His own blood.
Such a violent metaphor. But it works. Micken is drowning on blood and seeing the sea, just as Jojen of the moss-green eyes had foreseen Micken would, except that seeing the sea means drowning on blood. It's not so much about Micken being Azor Ahai, as it is a simple demonstration that when someone is sacrificed with a red smile type throat wound, they can be seen as drowning in the sea, which is again simply a confirmation of the Weirwood stigmata theory, which already associates red smiles and neck slicing with going into the Weirwoods. Tyrion, another Azor Ahai reborn figure whom we just mentioned, if you recall, he was knocked unconscious and nearly died during that battle in A Game of Thrones, the one where he commanded a host of mountain clansmen from the Mountains of the Moon. I think that battle was called the Battle on the Green Fork. Yes, that's it. Tyrion says to Sansa afterward that one of your Northmen hit me with a morning star during the battle on the Green Fork. I escaped him by falling off my horse. With falling off your horse, of course, being a great horse, of course. I did it. His name is Mr. Ed. With falling off your horse, of course, being a great metaphor for being knocked out of the heavens, knocked off of the gray stallion Yggdrasil, if you will. Tyrion ended up showered in blood and viscera later when he stood up suddenly beneath his enemy's horse and eviscerated it with his spiked helm, which is gross, but the point is that Azor Ahai reborn symbolism appears alongside River of Blood symbolism, and, of course, with the battle being on the Green Fork. Tyrion has another death transformation scene that combines the notion of drinking the Green Sea and being immersed in it, even more so than Tyrion drinking his way across the Narrow Sea. And that would be his drowning in the Rhoyne, of course. When he goes into the river, it says, the stone man went over backwards, grabbing hold of Tyrion as he fell. They hit the river with a towering splash, and Mother Rhoyne swallowed up the two of them. So that's the river swallowing Tyrion. And then we can see that it also works the other way around as well. When Tyrion asks Haldan Halfmaester when he might be able to stop worrying about contracting grayscale. And Haldan says,
Truly, said the Halfmaester, never. You swallowed half the river. You may be going gray even now, turning to stone from inside out, starting with your heart and lungs.
There is plenty more to discuss here at the Bridge of Dream, especially since a fishing weir can also be a bridge, meaning that a Bridge of Dream is a weir of dream. It's straddling the river, too. It's made of pale stone, like a petrified weirwood, and it collects people who slowly turn into statues. Recalling that Bran describes Bloodraven as some ghastly statue made of twisted wood, old bone, and rotted wool, we can see that the Weirwoods do indeed pluck people from the River of Time and turn them into statues. You'll also recall that they only get trapped in a fight with the Stone Men after time and space sort of short circuits and puts Tyrion's company somehow passing under the same bridge twice. John Connington says that rivers only flow one way. But of course, we know that the Weirwoods stand outside the River of Time, and we could say the same about the Bridge of Dream. And here I will stop and give a shout out to an episode that I did with Quinn on his Ideas of Ice and Fire channel just last week. We talked all about the Rhoyne and with some of the metaphors on the Rhoyne here. We went into a little bit more detail. So if you want to check that out, and I know you do, go over to Ideas of Ice and Fire's channel and check out that video. Did you have fun with that one, Quinn? I enjoyed that quite a lot.
Yeah, that one was great. I like listening to that podcast. It's really cool.
Thanks for having me on. I always appreciate it.
Yeah.
And for such a topic. So with all that set up, Tyrion is then swallowed by the river and swallows the river in turn. And then Haldan Halfmaester specifically ascribes a transformative power to the waters itself when he says that swallowing the river could mean that Tyrion's insides are turning gray from the inside out. Turning gray? Wait a minute. The Azor Ahai reborn figure drowns in the green sea beneath the Bridge of Dream, is reborn, and now might be turning into a gray statue? You see how this Grey King mythology and Azor Ahai mythology dovetails so nicely. The Grey King obtains the living fire of the sea dragon and the fire of the burning tree, and then becomes a gray-skinned man sitting on a Weirwood throne and supposedly living for 1,000 years. Or to say it another way, Azor Ahai reborn. Excuse me. To say it another way, Azor Ahai was reborn in the sea, as Stannis says, but not like Stannis thinks, because he really was reborn in the green sea of the Weirwood net. He came out as the Grey King, possessing the fire of the gods, and the Grey King possessing the fire of the gods, in my opinion, seems to be a living corpse. Oh, sorry, let me back up. He came out as the Grey King, possessing the fire of the gods, and seems to be a living corpse sitting on a Weirwood throne. A green zombie, I would call him. This is probably the same story as the last hero dying and being resurrected through the Weirwood net to become a green zombie hero, leading the Night's Watch with his sword of dragon steel. I think that's a pretty nice alignment. We'll talk more about this when we shift over to Nissa figures who go swimming in the Green Sea in the back half of this episode. Now, we can't talk about Grey King and being reborn in the sea without mentioning the damp hair, right? He even has a chapter called The Drowned Man. Aeron Greyjoy, aka the Damp Hair, is like Tyrion in that he both drinks and drowns. Here's the relevant quote from A Feast for Crows.
At 6 and 10 he called himself a man, but in truth he had been a sack of wine with legs. He would sing, he would dance, but not the finger dance, never again. He would jape and jabber and make mock. He played the pipes, he juggled, he rode horses and could drink more than all the Winches and Botleys and half the Harlaws too. The drowned god gives every man a gift, even him. No man could piss longer or farther than Aeron Greyjoy, as he proved at every feast. Once he bet his new longship against a herd of goats that he could quench a hearth fire with no more than his cock. Aeron feasted on goat for a year, and named the longship Golden Storm, though Balon threatened to hang him from her mast when he heard what sort of ram his brother proposed to mount upon her prow.
That's impossible to read with a straight face, dude. Oh, man. Okay, and then a moment later, thinking of his young, foolish self, Aeron thinks, that man is dead. Aeron had drowned and been reborn from the sea, the god's own prophet. So he drinks more than anyone, and then he drowned and was reborn. The idea of him being hung from the mast is also a call out to Odin's hanging on a tree, especially here in the context of Aeron gaining the ability to hear the drowned god and speak with his voice. Check out this quote from A Clash of Kings.
And what of you, uncle? Theon asked. You were no priest when I was taken from Pike. I remember how you would sing the old reaving songs standing on the table with a horn of ale in hand. Young I was, and vain, Aeron Greyjoy said, but the sea washed my follies and my vanities away. That man drowned, nephew, his lungs filled with seawater, and the fish ate the scales off his eyes. When I rose again, I saw clearly.
When he rose from the sea, he could see. I think that pretty neatly encompasses the idea here today. There's even a line I didn't quote about Aeron winning a bet by being able to quench a hearth fire with his stream. This evokes the pyromancer's piss description of wildfire and relates his legendary drinking to drinking the fire of the gods. Heck, even his name, Aeron, sounds like Aerion, the man who drank wildfire and killed himself. Finally, notice Theon's sort of frozen mental image of young Aeron, singing old reaving songs with a horn of ale in his hand. Odin always drank his mead of poetry from a horn, which I think is being evoked here, and singing songs of the sea simply reminds us that the natural residents of the Green Sea, the children of the forest, are really called those who sing the song of earth. Now look, we're talking about drowning and being reborn in the sea and how everything under the sea is a metaphor, and I know you want to hear about Patchface. Well, Patchface needs his own episode, that's all I can say. But we've already taken a quick look at him in the Sacred Order of the Green Zombie series, and we remember that he is a stag man with red and green patchwork tattoos on his face. Sorry, I didn't paint my face, guys. Just didn't want to go quite that hard. I'm here for the cheap cosplay, not the real cosplay. In any case, he has the red and green patchwork tattoos on his face. He mysteriously drowned at sea and then washed on shore 3 days later to be reborn from the sea. He's lost most of his wits now, but can hear some sort of voice of prophecy from under the sea, which is a classic shamanic motif. The idea that gaining third sight can render you half mad, and one of the connotations of Odin's name is madness, of course. Patchface has acquired the terrible knowledge, as indicated by his knowing lament of I know, oh, oh, oh. Now, before Patches drowned, he was a child who was nimble as a monkey and witty as a dozen courtiers. He juggles and riddles and does magic, and he can sing prettily in 4 tongues. So he's a magic-wielding child man who can sing in many languages? Red and green? Antlers? Reborn in the sea? Now all this makes a bit more sense, right? It's just a weird take on the same story of Azor Ahai being a demonic stag man who was reborn in the green sea of the Weirwood Net. Another time, we'll go through all of his little sayings and songs and try to decode them one by one. And I have an idea to do that on a live stream 2 weeks from now. I think I'm going to do a Patchface roundtable live stream and get several myth heads to come on, and we'll all debate Patchface. But in any case, that's 2 weeks from now. Just for today, I want to leave you with just one of the Under the Sea quotes to tide you over. This is Sir Melagorn, one of Queen Salisa's knights, talking to John in A Dance with Dragons.
Who will lead the ranging? Are you offering yourself, sir? Do I look so foolish? Patchface jumped up. I will lead it. His bells rang merrily. We will march into the sea and out again.
I'm seeing a request for the document. Yeah, here it is, guys. It's not linked from Lucifer Means Lightbringer menu yet. I haven't integrated it, but there is the link right there in the chat, and I can probably go ahead and add this to the description real quick. In fact, yes, I can. And while y'all waiting for me, go over and like the Between Two Weirwoods page if you haven't done it already. Go like my page, or else you'll miss the live stream next week. Okay, so I have added the link to the text version of this essay to the description of the video. So all you got to do is scroll up. There you go. No problem, Pablo. You're my homie. I got you, buddy. Okay, so Patchface will march into the sea and out again. He's going to lead the ranging north of the wall. You can see how loaded all these Patchface quotes are going to be. There's even more to this one, but just that one line says a ton. A reborn stagman hero leading the Night's Watch into the sea and out again. This is a tremendous synthesis of Grey King mythology, Azor Ahai mythology, Last Hero green zombie symbolism, Stagman symbolism, and sheer madness. All right, well, let's go ahead and move on to our one deep dive example of an Azor Ahai figure drowning amidst fire and being resurrected from the sea. And that's the end of this section. How am I doing there, Quinn?
I think you're doing pretty good. I'm like having a lot of fun listening to this.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool ball of wax, huh? This under the sea shit.
I'm also watching the chat too. And hey, everybody. That's like said hey to me.
Hey. Yep. I would, like I said, I don't catch many of the comments when I do a live podcast on the first run through, but I always go back and watch them and read them all. So I will see whatever you say, even if I don't respond right away.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So the Jade Demon. This next section is called the Jade Demon, and it is sponsored by more of our sacred. Scroll down. Sacred Order of the Black Hand patrons. We left off with, let's see. Left off with Lord Brandon Brewer. Yes, we did. So this section is sponsored by Servorian, the Warg of the Morning, wielder of the dual blades of sunrise, and by Poseidon of the Dragonglass Sea, the Orcish priest. And I spelled that S-E-E, of course. By Westeros of the Cosmic Mill, the Unchained Uncle, host of bards, and good friend to all myth heads. Hey, Westeros, hope you're having a good day, brother. And I'd also like to thank Lady Shar, wielder of the Sacred Shard, Ice Priestess of the House of the Unsleeping, and because he's in the chat, and because he sent me a 420 super chat. Thanks to Ridiculous Ed Tolle, the Firebeard of the Dragonglass Forge, whose eyes are like pale morning mist. All right, thanks, guys. Thank you very much. All right, so this next section is called The Jade Demon. That's right, it's Davos at the Blackwater time. Yay! We're not going to deal with the entire battle, which is immense, but we'll cover Davos's part in it. The basic elements of play are readily apparent by now. Tons of wildfire, including the infamous swirling demon of green flame. We've got burning ships, not one, but two weirs, Tyrion's chain boom and the bridge of ships that temporarily forms. And finally, Davos's drowning and resurrection on the spears of the Merling King. Some of the ship ramming is important too, I suppose. So let's set sail. Davos is a Clash of Kings chapter about the Battle of the Blackwater starts off with vivid imagery. And by the way, we're basically doing a chapter reread in this section here. I'm basically just went through the chapter start to finish, and everything I'm going to give you is right in order. So this is a mini mythical astronomy chapter reread here. So Davos's ship, the Black Betha, rides the flood tide of the choppy Blackwater Bay. That's interesting that Davos sails a ship named after Black Betha Blackwood, a woman whose house is strongly tied to Weirwoods and Greenseers, but who married a dragon. Aegon V, a.k.a. Aegon the Unlikely, a.k.a. Egg from Dunk and Egg. That makes Davos's ship Black Betha a ship associated with both Weirwoods and dragons, and specifically to a Weirwood goddess giving birth to dragon offspring. That is deeply layered sea dragon metaphor. Yes, it is. Recalling the Grey King and his Weirwood throne and Weirwood boat. And spoiler alert, Black Betha does indeed catch on fire, making it a burning sea dragon boat. This puts Davos as our Azor Ahai Greenseer figure, who is set to undergo death transformation and enter the Green Sea, as he's the captain of the fiery Weirwood sea dragon boat Black Betha. Davos also wears an old green cloak for what it's worth. I think it's worth a little something. Considering that this entire fleet belongs to Stannis, all of the ships are really sea dragon boats, since Stannis is a little bit Targaryen and is, of course, an Azor Ahai figure. But hey, don't take my word for it. This is the second paragraph of the chapter.
Across the sea, war horns boomed. Deep-throaty moans like the calls of monstrous serpents repeated ship to ship.
Well then, the boats are sea serpents with deep, throaty war horn calls. They must be speaking the language of Leviathan. That's clear enough. And again, most of these boats burn. Although I hate to step away from the Davos chapter, I do have to compare it to this line. This line to the sighting of the Old Man of the River on the Rhoyne in Tyrion's chapter.
It was another turtle, a horned turtle of enormous size, its dark green shell molted with brown and overgrown with water moss and crusty black river mollusk. It raised its head and bellowed, a deep-throated thrumming roar louder than any war horn that Tyrion had ever heard.
It's a dark green, horned sea monster with a deep-throated war horn call. Very like Davos and Stannis' fleet of sea dragon boats with their sea serpent calls. I thought I'd point it out since this is the same river that Tyrion swallowed and was swallowed by that we just talked about. Now, returning to the Battle of the Blackwater.
The war horn sounded again, commands drifting back from the fury. Davos felt a tingle in his missing fingertips. Out oars, he shouted. Form line. 100 blades dipped down into the water as the oars master's drum began to boom. The sound was like the beating of a great slow heart. And the oars moved at every stroke, 100 men pulling as one. Wooden wings sprouted from the wraith and Lady Mara as well. 3 galleys kept pace, and their blades churning the water.
Okay, so our fleet of sea dragon boats has now sprouted wooden wings. What a great metaphor for flying through the Weirwood trees, as Bran does. It's the Weirwood boat as a ship for astral projection motif again, and it's a good one. Twice the oars are called blades, which shows us our sea dragon thrusting blades into the water. You can't forget the sea dragon as a falling meteor part of the myth, right? We also have to notice that our sea dragon boats have a heartbeat, and it's made up of a hive mind of sorts, with hundreds of men pulling as one. Oh, and all this is triggered by blowing horns, the ones which sound like sea serpent calls. There's a matching line a bit further on.
The sea was full of sound, shouts and calls, war horns and drums, and the trill of pipes, the slap of wood on water as thousands of oars rose and fell.
Ah, the sea is full of sound. It's full of singers, at the very least. There's an important line of ominous foreshadowing about the ship named Swordfish, lagging as ever, about Davos having grave doubts about her captain. Swordfish is the ship that first rams the bait ship. Oh, God, let me just start that whole paragraph over again. Okay. Next up, there's an important line of ominous foreshadowing about the ship named Swordfish, lagging as ever, and about Davos having grave doubts about her captain. Swordfish is, of course, the ship that first rams the bait ship full of wildfire and looses the Jade Demon. Of course, Swordfish. It's like the sea dragon being a sword, or like the castle pike sitting on the point of the sword land that plunged into the sea. And oh, by the way, the word pike can refer to both a spear or a fish. That's right, Swordfish. Next, we get a list of ships in next up, we get a list of ships in Stannis' Sea Dragon fleet, a few of which are worth mentioning, most of them actually. Ships such as Stag of the Sea, that's our man Azor Ahai, the Horned Lord of the Green Sea. And there's another ship called Horned Honor. Brightfish gives us fishboat imagery combined with an allusion to light bringing, or fire, or explosions, or something. And of course, these ships all burn. And then we have the unfortunately named Sea Demon, which sounds like a foreshadowing of the unleashing of the Jade Demon on the river. And of course, both of these demons of the Green Sea ultimately refer to Azor Ahai. Swift Sword, that's another ship, is a bit like Swordfish in that it gives us the falling meteor sword aspect of the Sea Dragon. And there's also a Trident 3, which sounds like it could be the name for a ship from Starfleet, as in Star Trek, quite frankly, Trident 3. But it's also a ship that is a weapon and evokes the Trident River and the trident as a symbol of the sea god's power. And there's also a ship named Scepter as well, another symbol of power. Then there's Princess Rhaenys and Red Raven, which seem evocative of fire and moon death, and bleeding stars as red ravens. And of course, a red raven is very close to Blood Raven, and thus this sea dragon boat is further tied to green seer dragons. Finally, Salladhor Saan's Valerian is simply yet another dragon boat in Stannis' fleet. These ships all have one thing in common, and it's more ominous foreshadowing, given the events of the battle. Quinn? There you go.
From every stern streamed the fiery heart of the Lord of Light, red and yellow and orange. Sorry about that.
Oh, that's right. Wah wah. Burning sea dragon boats. This is unfortunate foreshadowing. They might have picked a different sigil. And in fact, there's a bunch of talk on the battle about how they shouldn't have flown the red heart of R'hllor. So yes, the metaphor is about to come to life, folks. As they approach the river mouth, we read that the river that had seemed so narrow from a distance now stretched as wide as a sea, which makes the river into a sea, just to make sure we get the metaphor. As we know, the river is about to become a sea of green fire. Davos tastes a trap, it's a trap, and notices the chain boom on the way in, giving us the beginning of the Weirwoods as a trap metaphor. Later we see that the riverfront was a blackened desolation, burned by the Lannisters, and it contains the hunks of sunken ships. It contains the hulks of sunken ships. There's some, man, this under the sea stuff is some tongue twistery shit. So we see that the riverfront was a blackened desolation, burned by the Lannisters, and that it contains the hulks of sunken ships, recalling the scene at Lordsport, where Theon compares the sunken ships there to the bones of dead leviathans. The chain itself has good symbolism, as Davos sees it snaking out of a hole no bigger than a man's head and disappearing under the water. It's fun to imagine a Cthulhu-like Naga man with a snake instead of a head, especially since the chain catches on fire. Now, the hole would be the black hole dark star that forms when the moon explodes in front of the sun, of course, and it is indeed from the black hole that the black meteor snakes come from, bearing fire. Then they disappear under the water like a drowning sea dragon meteor. Then we have arrows hissing like snakes throughout the battle, and they are frequently fire arrows. So this fiery snake as a meteor symbolism that's tied to the chain really abounds throughout the battle. The falling arrows are also called a rain of shafts at one point, giving us the storm of meteor swords symbolism. Then we get an even better meteor metaphor.
Ashore, the arms of the great trebuchets rose 1, 2, 3, and 100 stones climbed high into the yellow sky. Each one was as large as a man's head. When they fell, they sent up great gouts of water, smashed through oak planking, and turned living men into bone and pulp and gristle.
Decapitated stone heads make us think of the moon as the face of a person with an invisible body, especially falling out of the sky to strike the sea dragon ships. They're also turning men into bone and pulp and gristle, which is another way of saying blood and bone, and thus might be a depiction of sea dragon men entering the Weirwoods by turning into images of the Weirwoods. Pulpy, bloody tree people, struck with the meteor fire of the gods. That's what it means when someone burns on a sea dragon boat or drowns in the water anyways. There are sea dragon men entering the net, so it fits. A moment later, one of the boulders that strikes a ship is as big as an ox, which gives us a dash of lunar bull symbolism. All right, so Davos's Black Betha rams her first target successfully, but then Davos catches his first sight of the green hell that awaits.
A flash of green caught his eyes ahead and off to port, and a nest of writhing emerald serpents rose burning and hissing from the stern of Queen Alyssane. An instant later, Davos heard the dread cry of wildfire. He grimaced. Burning pitch was one thing. Wildfire was quite another. Evil stuff, and well nigh unquenchable. Smother it with a cloak, and the cloak took fire. Slap at a fleck of it with your palm, and your hand was aflame. Piss on wildfire, and your cock burns off. Old seamen like to say. Still, Sir Emery had warned them to expect a taste of the alchemist's vile substance.
Oh, George, you randy bastard. The seamen have a saying about pissing on wildfire and your cock burning off. The seamen. Very funny. But of course, we know wildfire is called Pyromancer's Piss. And unfortunately, Davos and the sea dragons are about to get a taste of the alchemist's vile substance. Again, send your complaints to George. He set up the joke, not me. In any case, it's more drinking wildfire, drinking from the green fountain, please don't at me, line of symbolism that we just discussed like mature adults. It really does line up with Arion, Bright Flame, and all the rest. Thus begins the fire transformations.
Men wreathed in green flame leapt into the water, shrieking like nothing human.
Aha! More men robed in fire. They're wreathed, giving them King of Winter wreath symbolism that we've seen on other Burning Men. And then they leap into the water, into the river, which is like a sea. They are also losing their humanity, shrieking like nothing human. Then, through black smoke and swirling green fire, Davos sees the massive rotten hulks that hides the big payload of wildfire. Davos calls them driftwood, which is fairly awesome. From this driftwood will be born the Jade Demon, making the Jade Demon itself yet another manifestation of Azor Ahai, the fire sorcerer, waking from burning wood of symbolic import. And that's another reason we know that the Jade Demon is one version of Azor Ahai. Black Betha ended up locking horns, if you will, with an enemy ship called White Hart, H-A-R-T Hart, which Davos's crew successfully boards and captures. This is a stag/tree yin-yang of sorts, a ship named for a white stag, which is what a hart is, and one named for a black wood. tangled together. One thinks of the doors of the House of Black and White, perhaps. In any case, then we get this absolutely bonkers line, which seems a reference to the God's Eye as the eclipse alignment, and then as Black Betha and White Heart are locked together.
For those few instants, Black Betha and White Heart were the calm eye in the midst of the storm.
The White Heart would be a symbol of the Solar King, I would think, the bright stagman figure, and it is bordered by Black Betha, whom I believe to be a fire moon figure, and therefore in terms of astronomy, I believe what we're seeing here is the sun being darkened by the eclipse. That is exactly what the God's Eye represents, according to me, and this is indeed the moment of calm right before the big explosion, mimicking the idea of a comet striking during the eclipse. Let me just make sure I'm being absolutely clear here. We've got the White Heart, the Black Betha joining together as the eye of the storm, and then right after that, kablooey. So it's a very good eclipse. Yes, very good eclipse symbol. And it's called the Eye of the Storm. Now, to set up the big explosion, we get a very long paragraph about the, quote, raging green inferno that the river has become, with various ships burning and tangling with one another. It's now the full hellscape that we remember from this battle, and then comes the fateful moment.
Captain, sir, Mathos touched his shoulder. It was Swordfish, her two banks of oars lifting and falling. She had never brought down her sails, and some burning pitch had caught her rigging. The flames spread as Davos watched, creeping over the ropes and sails until she trailed a head of yellow flame. Her ungainly iron ram fashioned after the likeness of the fish from which she took her name parted the surface of the river before her. Directly ahead, drifting toward her and swinging around to present a tempting plump target, was one of the Lannister hulks, floating low in the water. Slow green blood was leaking out between her boards. When he saw that, Davos Seaworth's heart stopped beating.
Whoever was talking crap about Vikings fans being masochists can eat that 2-point conversion, bitch! Of course, it's only tied, so I shouldn't say anything. We'll probably lose. And yes, being a Vikings fan is incredibly torturous. That is true. Can't deny it. In any case, what were we talking about? Oh, yes, the episode. So we've got a sea dragon that's also a sword. It's trailing a head of flame like a comet, and it's set to impregnate the plump, green-blooded Lannister ship. By the way, do you think George is making some sort of Incredible Hulk references here with all these hulks that are full of the Jade Demon? I certainly do. What about you, Quinn?
I mean, maybe. He is a comic fan. He's a big comic fan.
That's what I'm saying, man. He can't resist putting shout outs to his favorite comics. We've caught him doing it several times. So we've got a lot of hulks here that are full of the Jade Demon, and then it's about to turn into a monster. So yeah, I think this is an Incredible Hulk reference. In any case, picking up right where we left off with Quinn. Here we go.
With a grinding, splintering, tearing crash, Swordfish split the rotted hulk asunder. She burst like an overripe fruit, but no fruit had ever screamed that shattering, wooden scream. From inside her, Davos saw green gushing from 1,000 broken jars, poison from the entrails of a dying beast, glistening, shining, spreading across the surfaces of the river. Backwater, he roared. Away! Get her off of us! Backwater! The grappling lines were cut, and Davos felt the deck move under his feet as the Black Betha pushed free of White Heart. Her oars slid down into the water.
Hey, just real quick, guys. I know that on somebody else's live stream recently, there was some really weird thing where people were being timed out randomly, and people were not actually. No moderators were actually timing them out. It looks like that has happened. Bernie the Burnt and Mijicam, who are regular myth heads, somehow got timed out. I'm pretty sure that's an accident, guys. So please don't be offended. I'm sure that was an accident. So just chill. It wears off in like 5 minutes. So yeah, there's not a way to undo it that I know of. So sorry, Mijicam and Bernie. We love you. So just hang tight. And yeah, I don't know. Like I said, appears to be some sort of YouTube glitch. So, yeah. Anyways, moving along with this excellent battle scene. Given the river of time metaphor, Davos saying backwater is almost like saying do over, I want a do over, which is kind of funny because everything's about to get really bad. In any case, the God's Eye of the Storm union of White Heart and Black Betha then breaks up, right in sync with the swordfish colliding with the rotted Hulk. There's that word again. And evoking the shattering wood scream, an obvious call out to Nissa Nissa's scream. And that's all pretty great mythical astronomy. The overripe fruit description of the rotted Hulk is great. It's the same language used to describe the older flasks of wildfire that the pyromancers show Tyrion. So this is simply Martin being consistent about implying wildfire as the fruit of the burning tree. The symbolic burning tree is the weirwood, and Greenside is like drinking from the green fountain. Wildfire is basically being roped tightly into this line of symbolism by being implied as the overripe fruit of a burning tree. And here I'll give a huge Jester hat tip to Gretchen Ellis, aka Bale the Bard, for that observation. The entrails of a dying beast language strongly evokes the idea of Nissa Nissa as a slaughtered sea serpent, like Jormungand or Tiamat or Naga herself, who was slain, of course. But only death can pay for life, and this dying beast is about to give birth to a monster.
Then he heard a sharp, short wolf, as if someone had blown in his ear. Half a heartbeat later came the roar. The deck vanished beneath him, and black water smashed him across the face, filling his nose and mouth. He was choking, drowning, unsure which way was up. Davos wrestled the river in blind panic until suddenly he broke to the surface. He spat out water, sucked in air, grabbed hold of the nearest chunk of debris, and held on. Swordfish and the Hulk were gone. Blackened bodies were floating downstream beside him, and choking men clinging to bits of smoking wood. 50 feet high, a swirling demon of green flame danced upon the river. It had a dozen hands, in each a whip, and whatever they touched burst into flame. He saw Black Betha burning, and White Heart, and Loyal Man to either side. Piety, Cat, Courageous, Scepter, Red Raven, Harridan, Faithful, Fury, they had all gone up. King's Lander, and God's Grace as well. The demon was eating his own. Lord Valerian's shining pride of Driftmark was trying to turn, but the demon ran a lazy green finger across her silvery oars, and they flared up like so many tapers. For an instant, she seemed to be stroking the river with two banks of long, bright torches.
Alrighty then. Sea dragon boats carrying banks of torches, like the fire the drowned god brought from the sea. They've been given the living fire of the Jade Demon, and now they are all awesome burning boat sea dragon symbols. That will probably come as small consolation to the burning men leaping off of them, however. Center stage is the swirling demon of green flame dancing upon the river. The horned moon is known to dance upon the river, and that's who this fellow is. He's the son of sun and moon, a horned devil version of Azor Ahai Reborn as a green demon. He bears the fiery whip symbol that we also saw on the hands of the fiery vision of Khal Drogo, rising from the pyre of the alchemical wedding. And that, if you'll remember, his fiery lash was what cracked open the first dragon's egg. Drogo, like the green demon here, also represents Azor Ahai Reborn, waking from burning wood as a being of fire. And here we have green fire and the burning water to denote green seer symbolism, whereas Drogo had the rising column of ash and the smoky stallion for his green seer symbolism. And of course, there was also the firestorm and the thunderous hatching of the green egg. So the symbolism for green seeing can be different with Azor Ahai Reborn figures, but the message is the same. Azor Ahai underwent fiery rebirth in the green sea. All right. That's the last time I typed fiery rebirth. Oh, and by the way, we found out how the mysterious banning went down. It was actually Maester Mary's 2-year-old that accidentally banned 2 people. Fortunately, they were only timed out, so you guys better watch out. You better Stay on the good side of Maester May's 2-year-old. Or else. Anyways, that's pretty good stuff. The line about the demon eating its own is, I think, yet another Weirwood reference, since when a new green seer hooks up to a Weirwood tree, he's basically being slowly consumed by the tree, which harbors the spirits of his or her ancestors. We figured this out by thinking about the legend of the rat cook, who violated guest right and was therefore transformed into a huge white rat with red eyes, who was condemned to eat his offspring forever. White with red eyes is giveaway Weirwood symbolism, of course, and the principle of a Weirwood consuming the descendants of the people already in the tree is the same. So returning to the action, Davos, who's been thrown into the river and narrowly avoided drowning, grabs onto some debris and is carried back towards the mouth of the river amidst all the fiery green chaos. We read that the black water itself seemed to boil in its bed, and burning spars and burning men and pieces of broken ships filled the air. Look, Mommy, the bad men are flying. That's the point of the burning ships as Weirwood's metaphor, really. They enable you to possess the fire of the gods and fly like a green seer. It's not for everybody, though, clearly. Well, Davos starts to think, maybe he'll survive since he's a strong swimmer and Sal's ships are just out in the bay and maybe... but then he turns around and...
And then the current turned him about again. And Davos saw what awaited him downstream. The chain. God save us. They've raised the chain. When the river broadened out into the Blackwater Bay, the boom stretched taut, a bare 2 or 3 feet above the water. Already a dozen galleys had crashed into it, and the current was pushing others against them. Almost all were aflame, and the rest soon would be. Davos could make out the striped hulls of Saladar-san's ships beyond, but he knew he would never reach them. A wall of red-hot steel, blazing wood, and swirling green flame stretched before him. The mouth of the Blackwater Rush had turned into the mouth of hell.
And here we see the flaming weir spring to life. It's the mouth of hell, so it's both a weir stretching across the river and a portal to the fiery underworld. It's functioning exactly like a weir here, catching the sea dragon boats and straining them out of the river current. Notice the terrific War for the Dawn language here. The flaming weir had already captured a dozen burning galleys, a dozen sea dragons, which would represent our Night's Watch green zombies, and then the current was pushing others against them. The current was pushing others against them. The river, in other words, is pitting the others against a dozen burning sea dragons who are caught in the weir. That is pretty terrific. And there's another super chat from Brian Taylor. Under the sea, the mermaids smoke seaweed and flow outside the river of time. Very nice. It's a great 420 super chat, Brian. Cheers. Thanks. Good job, buddy. My myth heads are on top of it. As I mentioned, the chain boom, mouth of hell, is only one of 2 flaming weir symbols that span the river, with the other being the temporary bridge of ships, as it's called. That's all in Tyrion's chapter, and we are going to cover that another time when we're focusing on the bridge function of the Weirwoods more specifically, but just know that it is there, and it is a bridge of burning sea dragon ships. I've interpreted a burning ship as symbolizing a sea dragon and thus a weirwood. So seeing a bridge, a weir, made out of burning ships seems very on the nose, if you will. It's good confirmation of that interpretation. I will quickly note that on the other side of that bridge of ships from King's Landing is the King's Wood, the same wood set on fire by Aegon the Unworthy's wooden dragons, and I believe that part of it burns in this battle as well. Now, I do have to pull this one line from the Tyrion chapter as it associates the wildfire and the green demon with green dragons.
A dozen great fires raged under the city walls, where casts of burning pitch had exploded, but the wildfire reduced them to no more than candles in a burning house, their orange and scarlet pennons fluttering insignificantly against the jade holocaust. The low clouds caught the color of the burning river and roofed the sky in shades of shifting green, eerily beautiful, a terrible beauty, like dragonfire. Tyrion wondered if Aegon the Conqueror had felt this as he flew above his field of fire. LML has gone dark.
Just for a second.
There he is.
Woo! All right. The green fire. The green fire is like the fire of the green dragon. It's pretty good stuff. I mentioned that earlier. And it's also like a burning house that people and burning ships live inside. My house. It's made of green fire. Anyways, that's because the green dragon and the burning ships both represent the Weirwood net, which is a house made of green fire, I guess you would call it. There's a line from a Sansa chapter that needs to be mentioned as well. A Sansa chapter dealing with a battle, that is. And it too has great green sea wordplay.
The southern sky was a swirl with glowing, shifting colors, the reflections of the great fires that burned below. Baleful green tides moved against the bellies of the clouds, and pools of orange light spread across the heavens. The reds and yellows of common flame warred against the emeralds and jades of wildfire, each color flaring and then fading, birthing armies of short-lived shadows to die again. An instant later, green dawns gave way to orange dust, and in half a heartbeat. You are muted.
George is hitting us with basically a straightforward as above, so below thing right here. And he's showing us baleful green tides and pools of orange light swirling in the sky. That's a symbol of the green sea, also representing the cosmic ocean in the sky. Of course, the idea of the heavens being on fire is loaded with mythical astronomy and is suggestive of Lucifer warring against God in the heavens. The green fire and red fire fight one another. Fight fire with fire, I guess. Birthing shadow warriors to fight one another like dawn and dusk. This is incredibly suggestive of the War for the Dawn, where we had black shadow Night's Watchmen against white shadow others, battling for the dawn. Before we move on from Davos, we do have to mention a couple of bits from his A Storm of Swords chapter where he washes up on the spears of the Merlin King. First of all, being fished out of the sea on the prongs of the Merlin King's spear is simply more Weir talk, with the god of the Green Sea himself plucking Davos out, akin to Sansa escaping King's Landing on a boat named the Merlin King. Recalling his escape from the green hellscape on the river by swimming under the chain boom while Davos is sitting on this rock, we see references to swimming through a green murk and green darkness, emphasizing the water as the green sea. Davos thinks that, in his dreams, the river was still aflame, and the demons danced upon the water with fiery whips in their hands, while men blackened and burned beneath the lash, just to sort of re-emphasize the symbolism of the battle. The important part is when delirious Davos begins to hear the voice of God after praying desperately to the mother.
Perhaps it was only wind blowing against the rock, or the sound of the sea on the shore, but for an instant, Davos Seaworth heard her answer. "You called the fire," she whispered, her voice as faint as the sound of waves in a seashell, sad and soft. "You burned us, burned us, burned us."
That's cool. I mean, the voice is literally coming from the seashell, the sound of the waves. And we know that God speaking in the sound of the waves is exactly how Aeron perceives the drowned god speaking to him. So Davos, and in particular, Davos is hearing the voice of the wooden statue of the mother that was burned on Dragonstone, one of the burning wooden sea dragon gods. This is the voice of dead Nissa Nissa, in other words, which Davos hears as the whisperings of the sea. So Nissa Nissa essentially burned as a sea dragon on Dragonstone, and now she is speaking with the voice of the Green Sea. And this makes sense to see Davos. This makes sense because we already think that Nissa Nissa dies and sort of becomes the Weirwood net. And so it makes sense to see Davos hearing the voice of the mother while stranded in the gray-green sea, as it's called. Now, note the line about calling down the fire. This is like Nissa Nissa confronting Azor Ahai, basically, for his evil deeds. You know, it's like, hey, what the hell, man? It also highlights the key role of the Azor Ahai Grey King mythology, which is calling down the fire of the gods and paying a terrible price. When someone on that ship comes to rescue Davos, calls up and... sorry. When someone on the ship that comes to rescue Davos calls up to ask who he is, Davos thinks, a smuggler who rose above himself, a fool who loved his king too much and forgot his gods. That's standard Morning Star Lucifer language here, rising too high, with a nod to Azor High as a fool, such as with Dantos, Aegon Jinglebell, Crescent wearing Patchface's helm, and a few others. And by the way, I surgically removed the jinglers from these bells. Otherwise, it'd be like dingle, 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 dingle the whole time, and that would be pretty annoying. Yes, it would, after about 3 minutes. So it's been neutered. What can I say? Okay, so as you can see, Davos and the Battle of the Blackwater is simply packed with under the sea and sea dragon symbolism. It's really impossible to break down without those things, which is why I've saved the scene for so long. At the heart of the matter is the unification of drowning and burning symbolism, which is neatly summed up by Davos later when he thinks of all those who died at the Blackwater.
Drowned or burned with my sons and 1,000 others, gone to make a king in hell.
This is also a nod to Azor High as that demon king, such as we saw with the green demon on the river. It's also a nod to Azor High having something to do with making the others, and about the others coming out of the Green Sea, which they do. Most of all, it shows how drowning in the Green Sea and burning with green fire or on a sea dragon boat are really all getting at the same idea, which is Azor High / the Grey King entering the Weirwood net. Davos is our Azor High figure drowning beneath the burning weir, and Tyrion will be undergoing face carving and death transformation on the fiery bridge of ships in parallel fashion. That's right. That'll be a good scene to break down. But of course, you do remember the face carving. Now, this whole idea of Azor High being reborn in the sea is starting to make a lot of sense, right? Same for the Grey King coming to and from the sea. Now, this is more than just cryptic folklore. The Grey King wasn't reborn in the Green Sea. I'm sorry, the Grey King wasn't just reborn in the Green Sea. However, he also took a wife from the sea, didn't he? A mermaid wife, I believe it was. But Azor High took Nissa Nissa to wife, who was a Weirwood goddess in our estimation, an elf woman who already has a link to the Weirwoods. Of course, if the Green Sea is a metaphor for the Weirwood net, we can see that the tales match up after all. Taking a wife from the sea really means taking a woman from the trees or from the forest. Describing her as a mermaid implies that this woman is a natural denizen of the sea, a sea creature, just as you would think of the children of the forest as, well, the natural residents of the forest. That brings us to the symbolism of drowning moon maidens, whom I've been comparing to mermaids for quite a long time. Hat tip to Crowfood's daughter of the Disputed Lands channel, of course. You may even recall that Nyssa, Nyssa, was an Okeanid water nymph in Greek mythology, which invited us to consider Nissa Nissa as a mermaid way back when. But everything about moon drownings and mermaids takes on new meaning now. A moon goddess who drowned? No. More like a Nissa Nissa Weirwood goddess who died and went into the Green Sea. We're going to have a field day with Dany being reborn in the Green Dothraki Sea in just a minute. Well, actually next week. And yes, see what I did there? Field day, Dothraki Sea. Anyways, that's the end of the section. Whew, let me catch my breath. How's everyone doing in the chat? I see we got 144. We've had about 150 most of the time, so thanks, everyone. You guys must not love football. Oh, let's see if the Vikings won. This should be over by now. It was in overtime. Let's see, did they win? Still going. Still going. All right, maybe we'll get a tie. It's always fun. Anyways, Quinn, how you liking it so far?
Having fun listening to it, yeah. It's always nice. I feel like I'm like taking a class on like Song of Ice and Fire symbolism every time.
Well, I do feel like George is teaching us a lot with these books, and yeah, just trying to draw out the lessons.
Yeah, it's pretty freaking sweet.
Oh yes, that's true. There's something called a Nyssa tree, which is a gum tree that like has blood red sap. Isn't that right? Nyssa sylvatica. It's a black tree that bleeds, I want to say. But yeah, that is a catch by somebody else. I'll have to. Julie Beth is talking about it here. Yeah, the genus of the gum tree is Nyssa. Okay, cool. So yeah,
I
that's something.
oh
That's something. Go ahead.
no, I was gonna say like I retweeted a video like the other day of like someone cutting open like a tree and like blood coming out of it, like blood just like pours out of it. I don't know if that's the same type of tree, but that's on my Twitter
So
timeline.
that's that's a different kind of tree, and I think that one's named after a dragon, is it not?
I don't know. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it is
I just
that
thought it was
one.
cool.
It's true. There's a few different kinds of trees named after dragons, by the way, which is something I guess we'll have to get into because yeah, that seems relevant. And yeah, I guess the best football jersey to wear symbolically would have been a Green Bay jersey, since that's a green sea. But I'm a Vikings fan, and I really couldn't bring myself to wear a Green Bay jersey, and the Vikings sail on the sea, so that's all you get. Close enough. Close enough. It's Darcana Draco is the name of the tree. Painkiller Jane says, and it has red leaves and dragon fruit. Oh, there's a bloodworm tree, a bloodwood tree. Bloodwood tree is the one you shared, Quinn, I think. In any case, there you go. There's some research you guys can do. Bleeding trees. All right. So this next section is called Goddess of the Sea, and I'm going to thank a few patrons, but I need to give a fanfare to my next dragon patron, the third head of the dragon. I now have 3 dragon heads. We've got Bronsteres. I just announced Vesperes, the Nightbringer, the Shadowfire dragon. And now this one is going to be good. Falcores, the shag dragon, whose black stone scales are covered in purple and green 70s shag carpeting, and whose eyes, horns, wingbows, and spinal crest are as gray as a puff of smoke. It is said that Falcores, who has little interest in fighting unless roused, once blew a smoke ring large enough to encircle the black walls of Volantis. There you go. There's my new dragon patron. He's a stoned dragon instead of a stone dragon. That's what he wanted. So, and of course, Falcores, the shag dragon, a reference to Falcor and the never-ending story. And I'd also like to thank some high priests of starry wisdom, such as Sir Morris Mayberry the Upright, climber of Jacob's Ladder, whose words are, "I drink and tweet things." He's actually a member of the Sacred Order of the Black Hand, a secret order within the priesthood of starry wisdom. And then I'd also like to thank Archmaester Emma, founder of the Maiden Maesters and keeper of the Two-Headed Sphinx, the Venus of Astgix, starry lady of the Dragonstones, Lady Danelle Bulwer, the soaring bat of Blackjack Mountain, the Black Maester Azazel, lord of the feasible and keeper of the records, whose rod and mask and ring smell of coffee. Hey, Aziz. Enevi, Shadowbinder from the Eastern Mountains and Lakes, and Sir Cosmo of House Dayspring, whose words are, "We walk at dawn." All right. Goddess of the Sea. Those of you who have done signs and portals too will know that we've already stumbled upon a pattern of Nissa Nissa figures undergoing a death transformation during a Lightbringer forging scene, followed by a journey to a watery underworld location, beginning with Sansa's flight from King's Landing in the aftermath of the Purple Wedding. Sansa doesn't die at the Purple Wedding, obviously, but rather disappears and transforms. You may recall the rumor about Sansa turning into a winged bat wolf and flying away from a tower top, which embodies the symbolic death transformation. In actuality, she fled through the Godswood, i.e. into the Weirwood Net, and then down into a dragon underworld location beneath the Red Keep, then climbed down the cliff face and escaped into the foggy and ethereal Blackwater Bay aboard the Merling King. This all makes more sense now. We already interpreted her flight through the Godswood, where she pulls a deep green cloak from the bole of a tree as a representation of Nissa Nissa fleeing into the Weirwoods, but now we can see that her escape into the sea aboard the Merling King really drives home the point by showing Nissa Nissa fleeing into the sea. Sansa was far from the only Nissa Nissa who flees into the sea after a symbolic death or symbolic Lightbringer forging scene, and they are all going to add even more confirmation to the basic theory of the Weirwood Goddess series, that Nissa Nissa went into the Weirwoods. As we've discussed, As we've discussed, Catelyn Stark was given the Weirwood stigmata at the Red Wedding, which signifies her as a Nissa Nissa figure being sacrificed and sent inside the Weirwoods. And of course, right after this happens, Catelyn's body is thrown into the Green Fork in a savage mockery of House Tully's funeral customs, as Tyrion thinks to himself. It's the same message as the stigmata. Nissa Nissa is dying and going into the Green Sea. The comparison to the Tully rites triples down on the message, since that is trademark burning boat sea dragon stuff, as we know. There's another great reference to drowning in the Green Sea, connected to Catelyn, that comes when she looks at Renly's armor. And you may already be thinking of this one already, as it's just so tremendously big and tremendously wet.
Beside the entrance, the king's armor stood sentry, a suit of forest green plate, its fitting chased with gold, the helm crowned by a great rack of golden antlers. The steel was polished to such a high sheen that she could see her reflection in the breastplate, gazing back at her as if from the bottom of a deep green pond. The face of a drowned woman, Catelyn thought. Can you drown in grief?
Hey guys, sorry, Red Bull time. Just need a little booster here. I see Joe Magician's making dick jokes in the yeah. Oh, tie game. Haha. Missed a field goal. Oh man. All right, there we go. So this is a famous quote. It's Catelyn looking at herself as a drowned woman. This quote is famous because, of course, she ends up being thrown in the river, and here she's seeing herself as being drowned. I mean, but now, wow, this Green Sea stuff really hits you in the face, right? Renly, the sacrificed green stag man who drowns in his own blood, has armor like a green pond. This is quite useful if you're a character in a fictional novel trying to foreshadow your own death and drowning, as Cat is. And Cat sees herself as a drowned woman in a green pond, and then her corpse is thrown into the Green Fork. Thing is, Renly's armor isn't just described as a green pond, it's also called forest green, right in the same quote. Is it a green pond or a green forest? Make up your mind. Then in the very chapter where he died in front of Cat and Brienne, Cat observes his armor again, and it's described as a deep wood.
The king's armor was a deep green, the green of leaves in a summer wood, so dark it drank the candlelight. Gold highlights gleamed from inlay and fastenings, like distant fires in that wood, winking every time he moved.
Renly's armor is like a deep green wood, or a deep green pond, but those are really referring to the same thing, the Green Sea of the Weirwoods. The fires in that deep green wood are the same thing as the fire in the sea motif of the sea dragon and the drowned god carrying fire from the sea. And they're winking at us like stars. Stars in the sea. Then Catelyn is resurrected as Lady Stoneheart. And when she is, she's pulled out of the river and given back the fire of life by Beric. And then she inhabits the famous Weirwood cave in the Riverlands. You can see how the symbolism is really working hard here, with her being pulled from the river, serving as a visual depiction of her coming back from death and becoming a Weirwood ghost / undead Nissa Nissa figure. Also note the Cerberus Guardian of the River Styx role played by Nymeria the Direwolf here, who was the one to fish Cat's body from the river. It's almost like Nymeria, in a Cerberus role, is granting permission for Catelyn to return from the land of the dead. And it's also a humorous call out to Arya's imagined Tully Stark sigil as a wolf with a fish in its mouth. Oh, I'm being told I got the crinkle going on here. Thanks for letting me know. It's a weird fluke of my device. It only does it on YouTube. It like doesn't do it when I'm recording. So it's really, really strange. But let's see here. Let me make sure. Oh, yeah. Sorry, guys. Technical difficulties. I need to make sure I'm still recording my track. Thanks for bearing with me. And okay, there we go. Back on track. Okay. Thanks, guys. If you ever hear it's still crackling, yeah, turning it off and on again. That's what I do. Quinn, how's it sound? Does it sound okay?
Say speak a sentence.
Speak a sentence without any
I
crackle.
I hear some crackling. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, 1 second. Okay, how about now?
Sounds good to me.
Okay, that's good. Sorry. Every once in a while, I got to unplug it and plug it back in. I have no idea why it happens. It does not affect me when I'm recording, only when I'm on the live stream. So the main thing is that if you ever hear any sort of technical difficulty, please tell me right away so I can fix it before we go on and on. When I did the live stream with Aziz, the whole second half had the crackle and nobody told me. And I went back and watched it on YouTube and I was like, ah! So thanks for speaking up when you hear it. Okay, so right. So let me just back up then. Renly's armor is like a deep green wood or deep green pond, but those are really referring to the same thing, the green sea of the Weirwoods. The fires in the deep green wood are the same thing as the fire in the sea motif of the sea dragon and the drowned god carrying fire from the sea, and they're winking at us like stars. Okay, no, I'm not going to read all that. You guys heard that, right? The Nymeria with the direwolf fishing her out of the river thing. It wasn't so bad that you couldn't hear it, right? Okay. Okay, so calling Catelyn a fish is obviously not an accident, since House Tully has the trout as their sigil. Many have remarked that Catelyn's fish associations, combined with her being thrown in the river, give her a grisly sort of mermaid symbolism. Yes, people have already caught on to that idea, and that's absolutely correct. And it sends the same message as the Grey King, or during God's grief, taking mermaid wives, as they were said to. Nissa Nissa was a native of the Green Sea and went into the Weirwood net when she died. And the Ghost of the High Heart actually sums it up the best.
I dreamt of a roaring river and a woman that was a fish. Dead she drifted with red tears on her cheeks. But when her eyes did open, oh, I woke from terror.
The red tears of the Weirwood stigmata are nicely juxtaposed with Catelyn as a fish woman after the Red Wedding. Catelyn is our signature Weirwood goddess, her and Melisandre, that is, and Catelyn is indeed a kind of mermaid. So what about Melisandre, you ask? Well, the first time we meet her is in Cressen's A Clash of Kings prologue chapter, and it says...
Maester, said the Lady Melisandre, her deep voice flavored with the music of the Jade Sea, you ought to take more care. As ever she wore red head to heel, a long loose gown of flowing silk, as bright as fire, with dagged sleeves and deep slashes in the bodice that showed glimpses of darker, blood-red fabric beneath.
That word is dagged, by the way.
Dagged.
Yes. Oh, so her voice is flavored with the Jade Sea. You don't say. The Jade Sea? You mean the Green Sea? The children of the forest are actually those who sing the Song of Earth, of course, making them singers of the Green Sea. And Melisandre's voice is like the music of the Green Sea, because Nissa Nissa was, in some sense, a singer, an elf woman. As a bonus, her flowing silk, as bright as fire, creates the image of garments made of liquid fire, and the blood-red fabric beneath suggests garments made of flowing blood. Sounds like someone's got some fire and blood into the Jade Green Sea here. Uh-oh. Then a few chapters later in A Clash of Kings, we get the burning of the 7 on Dragonstone, and Martin builds on the idea that Melisandre's voice has the music of the Jade Sea by saying that Melisandre sang in the tongue of a shy, her voice rising and falling like the tides of the sea. Again, this isn't just singer symbolism, but singer symbolism tied to the sea, and coming from a Weirwood goddess. Now consider Davos rowing Melisandre into Storm's End. Here's another scene which takes on new meaning now. Melisandre is a fire moon, Nissa Nissa, who has just taken the seed and life fires of Stannis and is now pregnant with a shadow baby, and transits the pitch-black Shipbreaker Bay to her final destination. This tracks very well to Sansa fleeing the Red Wedding through the Godswood, or the Purple Wedding rather, through the Godswood and into the Blackwater Bay aboard the Merling King. The hollow knights of dragon armor beneath the red keep that Sansa seemed to stir to life as she passed by would be the equivalent of Melisandre birthing the shadow babies in this cavern, as I mentioned last time. Mel transits the Dark Bay to Storm's End, specifically to that cavern below the castle. Recalling our examination of Storm's End during In a Grove of Ash, Weirwood Compendium 4, we saw that the white cliff face and the rising fist description of Storm's End makes it a rising ash cloud weirwood symbol. And of course, the castle is also famous for its huge and ancient weirwood. That is until Melisandre burned it, adding to Storm's End weirwood symbolism and burning weirwood symbolism. That fits with Melisandre entering through the watery cavern below. The cavern evokes Bloodraven's cavern, since it's below a weirwood symbol, and the sea flowing into the cavern is simply bringing in the green sea, green seer symbolism. The Shadow Baby itself represents the rebirth of Azor Ahai as the Dark Solar King, as I've been saying since early in the Bloodstone Compendium, and its birth in the watery cave is another depiction of Azor Ahai being reborn in the sea, or from the sea. Note the sequence here. A pregnant weirwood goddess goes into the weirwood net and then gives birth to Azor Ahai reborn. Bronze Staries, are you listening? It's quite suggestive. Ravenous Reader would also like me to point out that there is indeed a river in Bloodraven's cave.
The caves were timeless, vast, silent. They were home to more than 70 living singers and the bones of thousands dead, and extended far below the hollow hill. Men should not go wandering in this place, Leaf warned them. The river you hear is swift and black and flows down and down to a sunless sea, and there are passages that go even deeper, bottomless pits and sudden shafts, forgotten ways that lead to the very center of the earth. Even my people have not explored them all, and we have lived here for thousands, for 1,000 of your man years.
1,000 of your man years. And note the timeless caves reference. Shout out to Wiz the Smith and his Hollow Hills, the Caves Are Timeless essay. If someone will kindly drop a link in the chat for that one, although I'm sure you've all read it by now. Still, shout out. That's where he got this. The caves were timeless. And that's also another example of the weirwoods existing outside of time. The Sunless Sea is a reference to a famous poem, Kubla Khan, or A Vision in a Dream by Samuel Taylor Coleridge, for those of you who want to do a bit of further reading. I'm not going to read it here. Sorry, Ravenous. We'll do that. Maybe we'll read it when we do the patch face rhyme roundtable. Yeah, there you go. Consider it a promise. But you can look it up if you want to. Our next drowning moon goddess, Nissa Nissa figure, who is symbolically entering the weirwood net. We have Ygritte. That's right, Ygritte, come on down. In the Grey King and the Sea Dragon episode, we mentioned that when Jon is offered Winterfell and the Stark name by Stannis, the price is setting fire to the heart tree at Winterfell. While he's anguishing over the choice, he dreams of swimming with Ygritte in one of the hot pools beneath the heart tree.
When the dreams took him, he found himself back home once more, splashing in the hot pools beneath a huge white weirwood that had his father's face. Ygritte was with him, laughing at him, shedding her skins till she was naked as her name day, trying to kiss him, but he couldn't, not with his father watching. He was the blood of Winterfell, a man of the Night's Watch. I will not father a bastard, he told her. I will not, I will not. You know nothing, Jon Snow, she whispered, her skin dissolving in the hot water, the flesh beneath sloughing off her bones until only skull and skeleton remained, and the pool bubbled thick and red.
Ygritte is, of course, a kissed by fire, red-headed, weirwood goddess figure, just like Cat and Melisandre. And here she is dissolving into the pool beneath the heart tree, which we can now see for a metaphor for merging with the weirwoods, and for the ego dissolution which is necessary to join a hive mind. I will also put in. Hat tip, Ravenous Reader. By filling the pool with her blood, it's implied that the weirwood tree will drink Ygritte's blood anyways, but the green sea, green seer wordplay makes the meaning of her melting into the pond crystal clear. Ygritte sheds her skins, and then her real skin melts, a depiction of Nissa Nissa as a skin changer, dying and going into the trees. She's literally turning into blood and bone. She is. That's all that's left of her is blood and bone. And of course, that is the famous description of the coloring of the Weirwoods, which is kind of like taking Weirwood stigmata to the next level. That's it. It's not hard enough to gouge out your eyes and cut your throat and set your hair on fire. You've got to literally boil your flesh off of your bones till you're blood and bone. Then you're like Weirwood stigmata captain. In any case, I've often said that the idea of Nissa Nissa opening the door to the Weirwood net for Azor Ahai and all of mankind may go as far as Nissa Nissa essentially becoming the Weirwood net as we know it by merging with the tree consciousness when she died. That's what's implied here, as Ygritte's blood transforms this mini sea before the heart tree into a sea of moon blood. The sea is Nissa Nissa, in other words. Sansa has a similar scene where she takes a hot bath and turns it bloody after the whole ridiculous scene where she gets her moon blood and tries to burn her entire mattress in the hearth fire, which you may recall from Bloodstone Compendium 3, Waves of Night and Moon Blood. Now, the Jon stream of melting Ygritte in the pond is obviously a partial memory of the unforgettable Jon and Ygritte cave scene, where Jon discovers the Lord's kiss on pure instinct. Attaboy, Jon. The key thing I want to point out is that Ygritte famously suggests to Jon that they stay in the cave forever.
They were soon fumbling and bumping into each other as they tried to dress in the dark. Ygritte stumbled into the pool and screeched at the cold of the water. When Jon laughed, she pulled him in too. They wrestled and splashed in the dark. And then she was in his arms again, and it turned out they were not finished after all. Jon Snow, she told him when he spent his seed inside her, don't move now, sweet. I like to feel you. I like the feel of you in there, I do. Let's not go back to Star and Jarl. Let's go down inside and join up with Gindle's children. I don't ever want to leave this cave, Jon Snow. Not ever.
So this scene has even more going on than you thought. And sorry for making you read that, Quinn. Once again, we have the cave and the water symbolism appearing together. And this suggests a green seer cave and the green sea metaphor. Ygritte, a Weirwood goddess, wants to trap Jon here in the Weirwood net and join up with children, which is an obvious allusion to the dead children of the forest green seers who inhabit the Weirwood net. And once again, we see the suggestion of copulation and reproduction inside the Weirwood net. And I actually skipped a paragraph. So going back a second to Ygritte boiling in the Weirwood pond and the flesh sloughing off her bones, there's a comparison here. So Ygritte's boiling also reminds us of Dany's dreams of being immolated in dragonfire, with her flesh melting and sloughing off her bones in basically the exact same fashion. Ygritte and Dany are both dying Nissa Nissa figures who are entering the sea of green fire, in a manner of speaking, and filling it with their blood. They are both losing their flesh, which is symbolic of their mortal life, to become only blood and bone, the look of the heart tree. So it's a really tight parallel there. But getting back to Jon and Ygritte and the cave scene, there's the first time that Jon and Ygritte hook up. There's also amazing Weirwood goddess symbolism, and it's almost too much to believe, actually. I just found it like 2 days ago, so take it away, Quinn.
My vows, he thought, remembering the Weirwood grove where he had said them, the 9 great white trees in a circle, the carved red faces watching, listening, but her fingers were undoing his laces, and her tongue was in his mouth, and her hand slipped inside his small clothes and brought him out. And he could not see the Weirwoods anymore, only her. She bit his neck, and he nuzzed hers, burying his nose in her thick red hair. Lucky, he thought. She is lucky. Fire-kissed. Isn't that good? She whispered, as she guided him inside her.
So once again, the technique of flashback is being used to superimpose one symbol on top of another, just like Jon and Ygritte on top of one another. Jon recalls the Weirwood Grove of 9 circle as they copulate, which symbolically places them inside the Weirwood net as they copulate. And then as he enters the Weirwood goddess, it says he could not see the Weirwoods anymore, only her. This is Azor Ahai going into the Weirwoods via some sort of magic ritual with Nissa Nissa, entering the darkness of the Green Sea. Here, the sex serves as a metaphor for Azor Ahai entering the tree, but may also imply some sort of baby sacrifice or magic child being involved, as we have discussed. Now we have plenty more drowning moon goddesses to examine and re-examine, and many of them are actually icy moon maidens dealing with blue pools and icy ponds. We're going to tackle those another time when we're talking more about the others in Night's Queen. There are two more major Nissa Nissa figures who are fire moon characters left that have between them by far the most Green Sea moon drowning symbolism. And one of those, Asha Greyjoy, will be the in-depth section that we will close the episode with now, while the other one is Daenerys, whose Green Sea symbolism is so large that it simply needs its own episode to discuss, and that will be the next Weirwood Compendium episode. The Asha stuff is really just insane, so let's get into that. All right, how am I doing on time? I got half an hour. I think I'm doing good. Again, I'm up against the hard time limit today, so got to keep charging ahead, guys. Got to keep charging ahead. And this next section is called this next section is called An Ocean of Leaves. And it is brought to you by the amazingly loyal Patreon support of such eminent personages as Black-Eyed Lily, the Dark Phoenix, the Orange Man, Patchface of Motley Wisdom, Obscured by Clouds, the Mayor of Walrusville, the Guest of the Yupik and Servant of Bodhi, Relora Girl, Mistress of the Pointy End, Stella di Silvestri, also called Yellow Stella, Mistress of Arcana, and Grin of Long Lake, the Smiling Ranger and Freezer of the White Knife. And Tom Cruise sitting on a couch drinking a Diet Coke next to a little picture of Winston Churchill, because I like him. All right. An Ocean of Leaves. Oh, and I guess I should stop and say, guys, if you're watching, please take 1 second and click the like button. That's right. Like the video that you're watching. You do like it, right? You've been watching for 2 hours. You must like it. So click the like. And don't forget to subscribe to the Between Two Weirwoods channel. And tell your friends. All right. Another great example of a Nissa Nissa character who drowns and enters the Weirwood net is Asha Greyjoy in her Wayward Bride chapter. That's right. It's the Wayward Bride again. I told you this was my favorite chapter. The climax scene gives us the dichotomy as clear as day. Asha is backed up against a tree like a Weirwood sacrifice, struck a lightning blow to the head, then catches a quick vision of a burning stagman in a dark wood before thinking of the drowned god's watery halls and losing consciousness. I'm not going to pull all the quotes from the whole chapter since we've pulled a lot of them before. So I'll just read the key ones that have to do with the under the sea symbolism, which is only like half the chapter. Asha's wooden shield is turned to kindling. And again, I'm talking about the climax scene right here. Asha's wooden shield is turned into kindling as the Northman's axe peels off long, pale splinters, with the kindling suggesting burning wood, and the long, pale wooden pointy thing suggesting Naga's fangs, or ribs as you prefer. She's dancing left and right, and then her back came up hard against a tree, and she could dance no more. Then her feet were tangled in some roots, trapping her. Oh boy. Which is flagrant Green Seer trapped in the weird symbolism. And remember, Asha is a squid, meaning a sea creature. The blow to the head makes a scream of steel, giving us Nissa Nissa's widow's wail of agony and ecstasy. And then the world went red and black and red again, and pain crackled up her leg like lightning, giving us the dramatic mythical astronomy language and the reference to the storm god's thunderbolt, which is like lightning. Asha is pinned to the tree, and when they are both struck by Asha is basically pinned to the tree, and then they're both struck by a lightning blow. And this really sounds like blood magic, a blood magic killing of Nissa Nissa that somehow involved the moon meteors. Then comes the reference to her going under the sea.
A trumpet blew. That's wrong, she thought. There are no trumpets in the drowned god's watery halls. Below the waves, the merlings hail their lord by blowing into seashells. She dreamt of red hearts burning, and a black stag in a golden wood with flames streaming from his antlers.
This is a wondrous conflation of the sea and the woods. She's almost dying in the actual woods, thinking that she's on her way to the watery halls, and then dreaming of a golden wood containing burning hearts and a black stag with fiery antlers. The burning stag man is, of course, a vision of resurrected Azor Ahai inside the Weirwood net that matches resurrected Renly at the Blackwater, and a golden wood full of burning hearts is another way of talking about burning trees and heart trees. So what we're seeing here is Asha as a Nissa Nissa sacrifice going into the fiery green sea of the Weirwood net, where we find Azor Ahai living inside her dream wood. This configuration again suggests that the Weirwood net might be a dream of Nissa Nissa from a certain perspective, a dream which the Green Seers inhabit. Fans of Tad Williams's Otherworld series might recognize this idea. Have you read that one, Quinn? Otherworld?
I have not, but I am familiar with that concept.
Yes. Yep. There's a large, well, I don't want to spoil it, but yeah, that idea is happening. So I'll just throw that out there. We're going to come back to that later, but I really am leaning strongly towards this idea as I do more research. The Weirwood net itself is like the mind of Nissa Nissa. So just file that away. The conflation with the sea and the woods actually runs all through this chapter, as I was hinting, just as the moon drowning language appears no less than 6 times in this chapter. I believe I counted once. This chapter, more than any other, functions like a dissertation on the Green Sea wordplay. So strap in, guys. Check out this quote from early in the chapter.
The sea was closer, only 5 leagues north, but Asha could not see it. Too many hills stood in the way, and trees, so many trees. The wolf's wood, the northern men named the forest. Most nights you could hear the wolves calling to each other through the dark. An ocean of leaves. Would it were an ocean of water. Would it were an ocean of water.
Would it weir an ocean of water? Wouldn't weir an ocean of water. This is Martin leading us, the horse, to the water. The trees are like an ocean, he tells us. The sea was closer, but she could not see it. It's pretty thick, and it continues as the chapter continues.
Okay. I cannot go home, she thought, but I dare not stay here much longer. The quiet of the woods unnerved her. Asha had spent her life on islands and on ships. The sea was never silent. The sound of the waves washing against a rocky shore was in her blood. But there were no waves at Deepwood Mott. Only the trees, the endless trees, soldier pines and sentinels, beech and ash and ancient oaks, chestnut trees and ironwoods and firs. The sound they made was softer than the sea, and she heard it only when the wind was blowing. Then the singing seemed to come from all around her, as if the trees were whispering to one another in some language that she could not understand. Tonight the whispering seemed louder than before. A rush of dead brown leaves, Asha told herself, bare branches creaking in the wind.
Isabel Harper, one of our inner circle of myth heads, pipes in with a great catch here. She mentions that Rhaenys and Meraxes were killed at the Hellholt, but the word holt means wood. So the Hellholt is like a hellwood. And of course, there's strong hints that Rhaenys didn't just die, but was actually kept down in the dungeon and tortured in the Hellwood. So that's a pretty good find. And dovetails very nicely with Asha here, who is trapped in the wood where all kinds of watery things are happening. I mean, that last chapter might be the one to put on a plaque. I have to wonder, is Asha like writing a thesis on the similarities and differences of the woods to the ocean here? That's basically what this is. It's like reflections comparing the woods to the ocean. The whispering sound of the ocean of leaves is compared to the ocean proper, enhancing the connection. But what's interesting is that the whispering of the leaves is, of course, the communication of the green seers. So again, we have a conflation of the idea of a green sea and green seers. In the last paragraph, Asha describes being able to hear the wolves call to each other through the woods that is like an ocean, which suggests the same thing. Asha passes off the whispering sounds as a rush of dead leaves and bare branches creaking in the wind, implying that the whisperings are coming from dead green seers, who are the dead leaves. And that is, of course, right on the money. One of the most outstanding lines in this chapter is the one where the trees seem to be attacking the moon, which I've pointed out at least 3 or 4 times in previous episodes as evidence that the green seers had something to do with pulling down the moon, as the Hammer of the Waters legend implies.
Deep Wood was aptly named. The trees were huge and dark, somehow threatening. Their limbs wove through one another and creaked with every breath of wind, and their higher branches scratched at the face of the moon. The sooner we are out of here, the better I will like it, Asha thought. The trees hate us all, deep in their wooden hearts. I love that.
Yeah, it is a great one. And you'll have to forgive me for using the same quotes in multiple episodes, but there are some things that we can pull from this now, which we weren't ready for last time. First, Deepwood is aptly named because if a forest is supposed to represent the sea, it needs to be deep, like the sea. And you'll notice most of the green descriptions we've pulled are deep green, like Renly's armor is deep green. Everything is deep green because it's like the deep sea. Secondly, remember that these are the green sea trees, which were whispering to one another in some secret language. And here they have wooden hearts. So now we can see that these trees really are intended to represent green seers and heart trees. And here they are, antagonizing the moon with hatred in their wooden hearts. As I mentioned, Asha is the moon maiden in this chapter, and the trees are equally antagonizing to her, both in this paragraph quoted here and in many others. This really takes flight when the Northmen attacking Asha's Ironborn dress up like trees to attack in stealth. Once again, we have green sea metaphors aplenty.
The wooden watchtower was the tallest thing this side of the mountains, rising 20 feet above the biggest sentinels and soldier pines. In the surrounding woods. There, Captain, said Chrome when she made the platform. Asha saw only trees and shadows, the moonlit hills and snowy peaks beyond. Then she realized that trees were creeping closer. Oh ho, she laughed. These mountain goats have cloaked themselves in pine boughs. The woods were on the move, creeping toward the castle like a slow green tide. She thought back to a tale she had heard as a child about the children of the forest and their battles with the first men, when the green seers had turned the trees to warriors.
First, notice that the tree warriors, coming from beneath the forest ocean, are a green tide. As I said, the forest as a green sea symbolism is rather persistent in this chapter. The trees appeared to be moving, of course, because Stannis' allies, the mountain clans of the north, have cloaked themselves in pine boughs. They are mountain goats, implying them as horned lords, hiding in the forest, in the Weirwood net. They have joined with trees and become tree people, horned tree people. There you go. Stannis sends the same image when Asha dreams of him as a black stag in a golden wood, as we just saw. Asha's recalling of the legend of the green seers turning the trees to warriors could actually apply equally well to the others who come from the Weirwoods or to the green zombies, since both seem to come out of the Weirwood net, because the green zombies are resurrected by the Weirwood goddess from the Weirwood net, at least something like that. That's kind of a topic for another day, but we already know that green zombies, if they exist, as I believe they do, come from the Weirwood net, and the others sure seem to do so as well. The White Walkers of the Wood, who emerge from the dark of the wood. Notice that when Asha sees, notice what Asha sees when she looks out. She sees trees, shadows, moonlight, and snow. And that's basically a great description of the others, who are white shadows that emerge from the dark of the wood. They're made of ice and snow, and they shine with reflected moonlight. So shadows, trees, moonlight, and snow. The sentinel trees and soldier pines add to the suggestion of tree warriors. So once again, Martin is presenting an idea in multiple forms at the same time. Now, Jon Snow, not a moon maiden, although he is a man-made, has a couple of wonderful green forest, green sea clues, and a couple of his scenes beyond the wall that so perfectly match these quotes from The Wayward Bride that we've got to bring them up here. And they're equally explicit. They are less about anyone going into the Weirwood net so much as what is in the Weirwood net and what may come out of it. This first one is from A Clash of Kings.
A blowing rain lashed at Jon's face as he spurred his horse across the swollen stream. Beside him, Lord Commander Mormont gave the hood of his cloak, uttering. His raven sat on his shoulder, feathers ruffled and soaked and grumpy as the old bear himself. A gust of wind sent wet leaves flapping round them like a flock of dead birds. The haunted forest, John thought ruefully. The drowned forest, more like it.
The drowned forest, with leaves like dead birds. But of course, this simply suggests birds and trees with the spirits of the dead inside them, which is what we see in Bloodraven's cave. The motif is emphasized again 2 paragraphs later when it says that up ahead, a hunting horn sounded a quavering note, half drowned beneath the constant patter of the rain. This is not only a drowned forest, it's an undersea forest, and everything else here is drowned too, including the half-drowned horn of Jarman, Buckwell. Under the sea, you're supposed to be welcomed with horns, right? Isn't that what Asha said? Drowned horns, I would think. Even better is this quote from a John chapter, later in A Clash of Kings, at the Fist of the First Men.
Okay. Do I sound good? People were saying that I was having sound problems last time.
Yeah, the last quote was a little garbled. It wasn't terrible, but now I think you sound okay. It must have been a little flux.
Okay.
This is a long quote. I'll stop you if it sounds weird.
Okay. Closer at hand, it was the trees that ruled. To south and east, the wood went on as far as John could see, a vast tangle of root and limb painted in 1,000 shades of green, with here and there a patch of red where a weirwood shouldered through the pines, and sentinels or a blush of yellow where some broadleaves had begun to turn. When the wind blew, he could hear the creak and groan of branches older than he was. 1,000 leaves fluttered, and for a moment the forest seemed a deep green sea, storm-tossed and heaving, eternal and unknowable. Ghost was not like to be alone down there, he thought. Anything could be moving under that sea, creeping toward the ring fort through the dark of the wood, concealed beneath those trees. Anything. How could they ever know? He stood there for a long time until the sun vanished behind the saw-toothed mountains and darkness began to creep through the forest.
That is another great one. The communication of the green seers through the Weirwoods is done through the rustling of the leaves, as we've seen many times. Thus, the wording here is very precise. 1,000 leaves flutter, and that is when, for a moment, the forest seemed like a deep green sea, which, by the way, is eternal. That gives us more caves, and Weirwoods are timeless outside the River of Time stuff. Then the forest also goes on as far as John can see, another hint at the play on the words with C and C. S-E-E and S-E-A. As for what is really moving As for what is really moving under that green sea, it turns out to be the others and their army of wights, which is later referred to as a tide of living dead men. In the prologue of A Game of Thrones, the others are shadows which emerge from the dark of the wood, and here John uses that exact phrase, the dark of the wood, interchangeably with that sea of trees. And then, as I mentioned later, John calls it a tide of living dead men, and that adds to the forest as sea imagery and draws a link to the green tide of forest people that seem to be attacking Asha at Deepwood Mont. We've also seen that the others have a ton of symbolism about icy ponds and frozen lakes, and that they seem to parallel Dante's Lucifer, who's trapped in a frozen lake until Armageddon. That's obviously an idea that we'll have to follow up on later, but you can see right away how the aquatic symbolism of the others coming from the icy lake dovetails very nicely with the idea of them coming from the dark of the wood, i.e. the sea. For now, I mention it only to say that the things moving beneath the sea are associated with green seers, in my estimation, one way or the other, whether it's ice or fire. Ghost is also, let's see, are we good? Do we have any audio, or do I sound okay, Quinn? Okay, I think we're good. Okay, so Ghost. It's not just the others that are under that green sea. It's also Ghost. John thinks about Ghost being under there, and Ghost has the exact coloring of a weirwood, as John notes to himself many times, blood and bone. He's a weirwood ghost, and of course, he's under the green sea. The others and Ghost are both referred to as white shadows, by the way, but unlike Ghost, But unlike the others, Ghost has eyes of hot red fire. They are called two red suns by John one time, for example. This seems a clue that not everyone under the sea is an other, and of course not, right? We know that Bran and Bloodraven are symbolically under the sea too, and they're not others, or even playing on Team Other. As I've mentioned, there seems to be different parts of the Weirwood net, a part which is under the control of the others and one which is not. A cold sea and a hot sea, if you will. And we will follow up on that in the future too. There's going to be lots of under the sea talk, basically from now until the end of time. It's going to infect every episode, just like moon meteors do. So you have that to look forward to. Lots of follow-up. So just to be clear, the reason why we look under the green sea forest and find both icy things like the others and their dead servants, and a being whose symbolism implies fire like Ghost, is because I believe that what we think of as ice and fire magic are both somehow tied to the Weirwood net. Now think of the Tully sigil, red and blue with a silver fish. So it gives you a clue that fire and ice both come from the water. And then the three forks of the trident, red, green, and blue, send the same message. So far in the Weirwood Compendium, we've been tracking down the connection between fire magic and green seer magic. And as I said, there is an entire line of evidence and symbolism linking the others to green seer magic. Obviously, there's a lot of under the sea symbolism to explore. And obviously, the Weirwood net is a complex place with a lot of goings on that we have yet to learn about. But right away, just with the examples of Nissanus and Moon Maidens drowning, coming from the sea, and the symbolism of Grey King and Azor Ahai being reborn in the sea, you can already see how the green sea or green sea wordplay makes a ton of sense. It fits seamlessly with everything we have discovered in all of our research so far. And we haven't even talked about Daenerys yet, or the Green Dothraki Sea. So, I will close with the freebiest of freebies, Sea Dragon Tower on Dragonstone, which has two relevant lines about it. One, it has a turnpike stair, which reminds us of Castle Pike on the Iron Islands, where we found all that sea dragon symbolism. And then there's this line from a Davos chapter of A Storm of Swords.
The towers were dragons hunched above the walls or poised for flight. The windworm seemed to scream defiance, while Sea Dragon Tower gazed serenely across the waves.
What is the Sea Dragon Tower doing? Why, gazing, of course. It could be doing anything at all. And Martin chose to portray it as gazing out to sea. It's a small detail, but a nice one. And of course, gazing is the exact word that Bloodraven uses when he talks about using the Weirwoods to gaze through these gates. You and I may gaze through the, into the past or whatever. So there it is. Sea Dragon Tower, gazing out to sea. All right, folks, that's it. Weirwood Compendium 6 in the books. 10 minutes to spare. Hey! And there was much rejoicing. All right. So, how'd you like it, Quinn?
Man, that was fun, man. Yeah, very engaging, very engaging. It's cool to see like everybody reacting to everything in the chat too as it's happening.
That's one of the reasons why I've really taken to, liking to perform all my new podcasts live, is because it's really valuable to see people react to the specific ideas. When I watch a replay, I can see which ones are confusing to people, which ones make people excited. And that's really been very valuable feedback for me. So yeah, I'm glad you like this one, guys. It's, of course, once again, all credit to Ravenous Reader and everybody else who's helped develop the under the sea symbolism. We've been talking about it behind closed doors and semi-closed doors for almost 2 years. And there were probably a few catches in this essay that, credit goes to someone and I forgot. So if you guys have been talking with us, Ravenous Reader and myself and everyone else over the years, then pat yourself on the back and know that it's definitely a group effort. Like I said, I didn't discover this, but it's so central, as you can see, to all the symbolism, and it confirms so much of the ideas about the Weirwoods that we've had that there's no way I could leave this alone. Definitely have to go into it. I've been stepping around it for like 10, 12 episodes. It's been really difficult, probably more. So I'm glad that now the cat is out. We can all be free to talk about it. Anytime we see water symbolism, we'll know what's up. And basically almost every scene in the book now reads differently when you go back over it. So we're going to be revisiting old scenes and mining this symbolism, mining deep in the sea. And yeah, so like I was saying, next week, We're going to do a Between Two Weirwoods episode that's going to be about religion in the story, both George's influences from world religion and the way that religion acts in the story, the way that it affects people's actions and beliefs. I will have Gretchen Ellis, aka Nienna the Wise, aka Bill the Bard. I'll have San Rixian, and both of them are college educated in things relating to religion and art history, which will be great. Great resources of knowledge that we'll draw upon. And of course, we'll also have Brendan Beefish of the Nauticast on there, who also has extensive religious knowledge. So it's going to be a very fun Between Two Weirwoods. And once again, guys, it is not going to be on this channel. It's on the Between Two Weirwoods channel. And so if you want to get notifications for it, you need to like Between Two Weirwoods channel. And the link is in the description of this video, and I will drop it again right now in the chat. So go give it a subscribe and a like if you haven't. And I will see you next week for that. In 2 weeks, either 2 weeks or 3 weeks, depending on my moving schedule. This is an idea I'm just coming up with today. I haven't pitched it to anyone yet, but I'm sure that the myth heads will be down. I'll have as many myth heads as I can on, and we will talk about all the patch face under the sea stuff. We'll be under the sea roundtable. We'll try to decode all the patch face rhymes. So you have that to look forward to. And a future Danny Greenseer episode coming. So lots of good stuff. If you'd like to support Mythical Astronomy, check out my Patreon campaign, which is linked on lucifermeanslightbringer.com, or you can just go to Patreon and look for Lucifer Means Lightbringer. And I would really appreciate it. So Quinn, please take a moment to tell everyone what you're working on, what you've done. I know we asked you already, but tell them again. Tell them what to come watch. Tell them where to find it.
Yep. Ideas of Ice and Fire. Just like throw my name in like Google and all my stuff should come up. Yeah. So what I'm working on this month is I'm trying to get my next episode of my Ultimate Guide to Dune saga out. And that's going to be Ultimate. That's going to be God Emperor of Dune, which is my personal favorite book in the series. So I'm really taking my time with it. So if you like Dune, check out that series, and also working on a Mist of Avalon video that I'm trying to get out by the end of the month, but we'll see where that goes. And then obviously I cover various other fantasy and sci-fi books like Foundation and A Song of Ice and Fire, obviously, and soon Hyperion by Dan Simmons. I've recently read it because of a lot of recommendations, and yeah, so that's what you can look forward to on my YouTube channel. And thanks for having me on here. It's been a lot of fun.
Man. Well, dude, thanks for coming on. Everyone loves your reading voice. Obviously, you're pretty much a legend for that. So I always feel privileged when you can come on and grace the Mythical Astronomy with your golden vocal cords. So thank you. And of course, we are good friends too. So it's always good to hang. And I guess, yeah, go watch football or take a nap or do whatever. I got work I got to get to. So thanks, everybody. Thanks for coming out. It was a great crowd today. I really appreciate it. Thanks to my moderators for dropping the links and running things. Thanks to all the Starry Wisdom crew for contributing. Thanks to my new Dragon Rider patrons. And thanks to everyone who signed up recently on Patreon. And I hope to see more of you over there. So see you later, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.